Welcome to the Signal of the Alpha, a werewolf fated mate romance, where fate is messy, the sparks are wild, and the full moon brings more than fur and fangs. There's snark, steam, and a mate bond neither of them ask for, but can't escape. Buckle up, pack. From haunted horrors to ancient curses, you'll find stories here that pull you in and don't let go. If you're into tales that twist the real and the unreal, you're in the right place. TM Nyxen Audiobooks. Hit the subscribe button and let's dive in. The mark appeared before dawn, etched in fire, not dream. A declaration. A cosmic decree was carved into Nova Karin's flesh as if it had been patiently waiting for the opportune moment to burn through. She'd been dreaming, lost in the familiar yet unsettling landscape of her subconscious. Wolves. Moonlight bathed everything in an ethereal glow. Their silver eyes, piercing and knowing, followed her relentlessly through twisting woods shimmered with an unseen power. But these weren't the comforting, whimsical dreams of childhood. These were visceral, electric, so real. They left her breathless, her heart pounding against her ribs. The line between dream and the reality blurred, leaving her disoriented and uneasy. Then came the heat. An unmistakable, unnatural burn blossomed on her left shoulder, pulling her violently from the dreamscape. It felt alien, invasive, unlike any ache or injury she'd experienced before. With trembling hands, she shoved her sleep shirt aside, the cotton snagging on her clammy skin, and turned toward the full-length mirror mounted on the back of her door, her breath hitched in her throat. There it was, a crescent mark, a perfect sliver of a moon, glowing faintly beneath her collarbone. The silver lines shimmered like captured starlight, pulsing with a soft internal light. Though the initial searing pain had subsided, the memory of it lingered. A phantom sensation felt like something had been branded into her soul, irrevocably changing her. It wasn't on her skin. It was deeper than that. This wasn't a skin condition, some strange birthmark she'd never noticed before. It wasn't a trick of the light or a figment of her imagination. This wasn't normal. Nova knew, with a certainty resonating deep within her bones, this was something extraordinary, something impossible. This was the moon's choice. A selection, a blessing, or perhaps a curse. She didn't know which, but the world would never look the same again. Everything was different now, tainted or illuminated, depending on how she chose to see it. Her life, her path, everything had been irrevocably altered. The rooftop was cold beneath her bare feet, the rough concrete a stark contrast to the lingering warmth on her shoulder. She stepped into the biting wind, the city still cloaked in the pre-dawn darkness. Up here, away from the suffocating noise and the prying eyes, the boundary between what was and what could be felt thinner, more permeable. The air crackled with a subtle energy, a promise of things to come. Lucan Voss was waiting. He stood like a sentinel at the edge, a dark and imposing figure outlined against the nascent light, arms crossed, watching the horizon. His dark hair whipped around his face in the relentless breeze, and the soft glow emanating from the distant city cast his features in warm gold, highlighting the sharp angles of his jaw and cheekbones. Normally, Lucan was all sharp edges and hard choices. An alpha, born of war, not sentiment, a leader forged in the crucible of constant conflict. But something flickered in his eyes when he understood. "You felt it," Nova said quietly, her voice barely rising above the wind's mournful howl. The words were simple, a statement of fact rather than a question. He turned, slowly, deliberately, as if he'd been expecting those exact words, and had been waiting for this moment. His storm-gray eyes, usually guarded and impenetrable, met hers with something between sorrow and a grim certainty. Yeah, one word, heavy with unspoken meaning. No need to explain. The bond, whatever it was, didn't require it. There was an inherent understanding, a connection that transcended language. She moved to him, drawn by instinct more than conscious thought. The pull was irresistible. A magnetic force defied logic. When her fingers brushed his arm, a jolt, a flicker of blue static, jumped between them. Energy crackled in the air, raising the hairs on her arms. The air seemed to bend and shimmer, as if the fabric of reality was rearranging itself around them, acknowledging their connection. "Is this real?" she whispered, the question laced with disbelief and a touch of fear. I tried to fight it. His jaw tightened, the muscle flexing under his skin. "I didn't think I could afford it, not now." The words were clipped, betraying the internal struggle raging within him. With the packs fracturing, the council is circling like vultures. She finished the thought, understanding the weight of his responsibilities, the precariousness of their situation. He nodded once, a curt acknowledgement of the truth. "But fate doesn't care what we can afford." A resignation tinged his voice, a sense of inevitability. "No," she said, her voice stronger now, infused with a newfound resolve. "It doesn't. If fate had chosen them, they would face it head-on." Silence settled between them, not empty or awkward, but heavy with shared understanding, unspoken promises, and a mutual acceptance of the path laid out before them. Below them, the city started to wake, its mechanical heart beginning to beat. Trains rumbled through the underbelly, carrying the first wave of commuters. Distant car horns called out, a discordant symphony of urban life. Life moved on, oblivious, unaware something ancient and powerful had been reawakened above their heads, reshaping the world in ways they couldn't even imagine. "You'll be targeted now," Lucan said, his voice low and grave. The statement was a warning, a stark reminder of the danger that awaited her. Nova met his gaze without flinching, her own eyes reflecting the city lights with a steely glint. "I already was." She was no stranger to danger, having lived with a target on her back for years. This was a new level of complication. "You're fated, makes you dangerous, or valuable," he elaborated, outlining the two likely scenarios that will unfold in the coming days. She would either be hunted down and eliminated, or she would be sought after and exploited. Let them try, a defiant smirk played on her lips. She wouldn't go down without a fight. Later, in the comms room buried deep beneath Pack HQ, the atmosphere was less mystical and more overtly tactical. The scent of ozone and stale coffee hung heavy in the air. Jace Vexley, Lucan's beta, and closest confidant sat surrounded by a chaotic array of monitors and blinking machines. A self-made tech savant with a perpetual smirk never left his face. He was a master of information, a digital wizard who could unravel complex algorithms with ease. The space glowed with a soft, pulsating blue light emanating from the walls covered in holographic territory grids and encrypted data streams. It felt like the digital nerve center of a dying world, a last bastion of hope in a sea of encroaching darkness. "You look like a man who got bonded and already regrets it," Jace said without turning, his fingers flying over the keyboard with lightning speed. His voice was casual, but there was an undercurrent of concern in his tone. "Not regrets," Luca muttered, his voice rough around the edges. "Fallout." Nova arched a brow, intrigued. "Fallout?" Lucan shot her half-smile. A fleeting expression of affection quickly vanished. "You're not the problem. Everything else is." "Cute," Jay said, glancing over his shoulder with a raised eyebrow. "Well, the digital noise around you two tripled. Territory sensors are picking up shadow movement, unexplained power surges. Something's watching." "Console?" Nova asked, stepping closer to the table, her eyes scanning the holographic map. The council was their biggest threat, a powerful and corrupt organization that sought to control all the packs. "Or someone worse," Jace replied, his fingers still dancing across the keyboard. "Signal cloaks are masking movements. Pulse echoes are bouncing off our shields. Whoever it is knows what they're doing." This was no amateur operation. They were dealing with someone skilled and experienced. "Do they know about the bond?" Lucan asked, his voice tight with concern. Jace shrugged, non-committal. "They will soon. You're lit up like a flare in every metaphysical spectrum we monitor." Their connection was broadcasting a signal so strong it was impossible to hide. Nova exhaled sharply, a wave of frustration washing over her. "Then we make a move before they do." They couldn't afford to wait and see what their enemies were planning. They had to take the initiative. "We're already behind," Jay said, pointing to a cluster of activity in the outer districts. Surveillance drones are scanning for something. They're not ours. The drones were sleek and silent, and advanced technology indicated a significant level of resources. Lucan's tone dropped into steel, his eyes narrowed. If they're hunting her, the threat hung in the air, unspoken but understood. They are, Jace cut in, his voice devoid of emotion. They haven't made their move yet. Nova looked between them, feeling the weight settle on her chest like a second skin. The pressure was mounting, and then we don't give them the chance. Lucan stepped beside her, their shoulders brushing, a silent reassurance. We faced this together, always. The word was a promise, a vow etched in her heart. That night, Nova dreamed again. But it wasn't a peaceful dream, a tranquil escape from the chaos of her waking life. It was a nightmare, a harrowing vision of wolves running, bleeding, crying out in anguish beneath the blood moon that stained the sky with its crimson light. Trees burning, consumed by insatiable flames, chains clinking ominously in the dark. A haunting sound sent shivers down her spine. They were calling for her, their desperate cries echoing in the vast emptiness of the dreamscape. No, not her. They were calling for help, pleading for salvation. And in the deepest part of herself, Nova Corrin knew. These were not dreams, mere figments of her imagination. They were warnings, urgent pleas for intervention. The wolves were real, trapped, and suffering, and time was running out. The urgency of their situation pressed down on her, suffocating her with its weight. She had to act, and she had to act fast. The fate of the wolves, and perhaps her own, rested on her shoulders. The rooftop was empty. Nova stood where Lucan had last touched her, fingers brushing her cheek, a kiss to her temple, before vanishing into the pre-dawn fog for a council run. It was 36 hours ago, an eternity. The air was colder now, not with the wind whistling through the gaps in the building's facade, but with absence. A silence ran in her bones, a hollow echo in the chambers of her heart. The kind only made sense when someone who should be there wasn't. The city hummed around her, oblivious to the gaping hole in her world. He hadn't come back. Worse, she couldn't feel him. The bond between them was a steady hum under her skin, a comforting rhythm resonated with every heartbeat, and now a void, not broken, not severed, leaving ragged edges and searing pain, veiled, like a thick shroud had dropped over her soul, muffling the connection, had always been her anchor, her guiding star in the chaotic night. She reached for it, a phantom limb groping for something solid, but found only a chilling emptiness. It made her blood run cold. A glacial freeze spread from the tips of her fingers to the core of her being. Fear, sharp and corrosive, gnawed at her edges, a stark contrast to the warmth Lucan had radiated. The secure calm crackled, shattering the oppressive silence. Nova snatched her phone off the railing, her fingers fumbling in her haste. "Jace, tell me you've got something." Nothing direct, came his voice, strained and thin, laced with a wariness mirrored in her own. But someone tried to wipe him clean last night. Digital trace, gone. Traffic grid, scent log, even the pack border drones. Her stomach clenched, and a painful knot stole her breath. The news was a punch to the gut, confirming her darkest suspicions. Random? No. This was precision. Someone who knew where to look and how to burn it all without tripping alarms. Civilian and pack systems both. They knew exactly what to erase and how to do it without leaving a single footprint. Nova was already moving, barefoot, the cold concrete biting at her soles. She grabbed her coat and tablet in one fluid motion. The apartment felt alien now, stripped of warmth. Devoid of the lingering scent of pine and cedar was Lucan's signature. Every second wasted was one more Lucan might be. No. She shoved the thought down, refusing to let it take root. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Trace the intrusion? I'm trying. Codes stacked like insulation, layered encryption, echo masks, tech bends both rule sets. This wasn't some rogue operating on stolen creds. This was a pro, someone with resources and serious skills. Her heart thudded against her ribs. a frantic drumbeat in the growing silence. Then who the hell was it? The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken dread. Silence on the line. Jace didn't have an answer, and was somehow worse than any name she could spit out. An unknown enemy was far more terrifying than one she could identify. The pack's data hub looked like a war zone of glowing screens and drained energy drinks. The air thrummed with the frantic energy of overworked servers and desperate hope. Jace sat hunched over a monitor, hoodie tangled around his shoulders, eyes glassy from lack of sleep. Blue light flickered against his drawn face, painting him in shades of exhaustion and grim determination. I ran a pheromone trace on Lucan's last movement, he said, skipping pleasantries. Got a hit, then it ends. Someone nose-scrubbed his eye. Nova didn't speak. She couldn't. Her fingers dug into the edge of the desk, the cheap laminate digging into her skin. As he continued, his voice flat and devoid of emotion, a necessary detachment in the face of their fear. 3 ways to erase a scent like 1. Voluntary sanctuary submission. 2. Chemical burn post-mortem. The implications hung in the air, unspoken but understood. She swallowed hard, bile rising in her throat. No, she refused to believe it. He paused, his eyes flickering with the look of something, pity perhaps. 3. External cloak tech. Hybrid grade. Witchwork? She asked, the word low, wary. Witchwork, with its unpredictable energies and arcane rituals, was always a wild card. Maybe, but the pattern's off. I've seen coven cloaking before. It's wild, organic. This, clean, clinical, like it came out of a lab, not a forest. He pointed at the screen, a holographic projection shimmering in the air. Energy flare, 3:44 a.m., abandoned transit yard outside packed boundaries. Nova leaned in, her eyes scanning the data. The heat map shimmered, data overlaid like a ghost trail, a faint echo of Lucan's presence, spike in temperature, movement, fast and decisive, stress signature, a jolt of fear and adrenaline. Then nothing. A dead zone, a void in the digital landscape. They took him, she whispered, the words barely audible above the hum of the computers. Right from under us, and used high-tier stealth to do it. The bond? They didn't block it. They targeted it, specifically suppressing your connection. Her hands curled into fists, nails biting into her skin. A desperate attempt to ground herself in reality. He's not dead. I'd know. I would feel it. Jace nodded, his expression softening slightly. I believe you. But whoever did this, they knew what they were after. They planned this. They were prepared. Nova stared at the screen, her voice a cold whisper, barely controlled. And they had access. Pack systems, council lines. You think this was internal? The thought was sickening, the betrayal a knife twisting in her gut. Jace's silence said everything. The unspoken accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. She turned to him, voice low, demanding. You were going to say Aaron, weren't you? Aaron, the rogue alpha, a constant thorn in their side, was fueled by hatred for the council. I was. But now? He shook his head, rubbing tired eyes. Aaron wouldn't scrub pack data this clean. He hates the council. He'd want them to know he hit us. He'd take credit for it. So this wasn't him. Relief washed over her, quickly followed by a fresh wave of dread. If it wasn't Aaron, then who? Unless he's changed tactics. No. Nova's gut twisted. This wasn't a message, a power play for territory or dominance. This was a cover-up. Quiet, surgical, hidden. They're trying to hide him, she said, the realization dawning on her with chilling clarity. Or what they're doing to him. Jace's face tightened, his jaw clenched. What if they're trying to sever the bond, completely isolate him? No, she snapped, too fast, too afraid to even consider the possibility. The bond was the core of her being, the foundation of their world. He held her gaze, unwavering. Nova, what if they're trying to copy it, mimic it, break it down, rewire him, use him? What if they're trying to weaponize your connection? The idea made her skin crawl, a violation so profound it stole her breath. It's sacred, she said, her voice strained. The bond's ours. You can't fake it. It's a part of us, woven into our souls. Jace shook his head, his expression grim. In the old days? Sure. But these days, with hybrid tech and biotech patches from both worlds, maybe someone found a way. Maybe someone has the capability to manipulate it into something we thought was untouchable. Nova straightened, her spine a steel rod. Her resolve hardened, replacing fear with a burning determination. Then we find him before they finish, before they have a chance to break him, or worse, turn him into something he's not. Jace looked up, eyes burning under the glow of data streams. No console, no rules. The moment we involve them, it becomes a political game. We lose control. She nodded, the decision made. We do this our way. He cracked his knuckles, already working, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Give me 3 hours. I'll build you a shadow trail. Something the console can't see. Something will lead us to him. The map on the wall looked like a war zone. Red strings connecting dozens of CTV stills, infrared snapshots, and data ghost pings. It was a chaotic web of deceit. Each thread a potential lead dissolved into nothing. Nova traced one of the threads with her finger, lips pressed in a thin line. The frustration was a knot in her stomach, tightening with each dead end. We've confirmed movement here, here, and here, Jace said, his voice tied with the same tension Nova felt. He tapped 3 points on the map in quick succession, each tap a staccato beat of disappointment. But only one reads like him, the rest duplicates. Nova frowned, pushing back a wave of exhaustion. The hours were blurring together, fueled by caffeine and desperation. You're saying someone's spoofing his signal? I'm saying someone's deliberately scattering his trail, Jace corrected, his tone grim, making it nearly impossible to get a clear lock on Lucan. Jace turned back to the primary terminal and brought up the feed from a parking garage downtown. The footage was grainy, the shadows deep, making the figure within them even more elusive. The timestamp indicated it was recorded 4 hours ago. A tall figure, built like Lucan, moved through the shadows with unmistakable purpose. He carried himself with a certain grace, a quiet confidence. But there was no scent signature. The shape, the walk, the almost palpable aura screamed Lucan. Nova's breath hitched, a surge of hope momentarily eclipsing the fatigue. It's him. The words were out before she could stop them. A desperate plea as much as a declaration. It looks like him, Jace corrected, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he adjusted the playback speed. He was a master of his craft, a digital bloodhound, and Nova trusted his judgment implicitly. But watch closely. He slowed the feed frame by painstaking frame. The figure moved, a shadow among shadows, until the figure glitched, only for half a second. A subtle lag in motion, an almost imperceptible stutter in his stride, a digital stitch in the fabric of reality. Deep fake overlay, Jay said grimly, confirming Nova's worst fears. Someone's masking another person's body with Lucan's movement profile. It's clever. Most AI wouldn't catch it, but I matched the body heat too low. Whoever this is not him. Nova stepped back, the weight of the revelation pressing down on her. Her jaw clenched, a muscle ticking in her cheek. How many more of these are out there? At least 7, different quadrants. They want you chasing ghosts. And it was working. The bond with Lucan still hummed somewhere beneath the static of the false leads, but it was faint, barely more than a whisper under the chaos. Worse, it pulled her in different directions, fractured and unreliable, as if Lucan himself was being ripped apart. Nova grabbed her gear, slinging her weapon's harness over her shoulders with a practiced motion. I'm going out, Jay stewed, his brow furrowed with concern. Where? Warehouse district. I want to see the body heat signature from yesterday myself. The lead was old, cold, but she needed something tangible, something real. You sure it's not another trap? I don't care. The words were sharp, devoid of emotion, masking the fear gnawed at her insides. The warehouse was silent, a cavernous space filled with the ghosts of industry. No cameras, no witnesses. Concrete and shadows, and the heavy, bitter scent of ozone. What was left after a cloaking spell burned out. A magic shield, used and discarded. Nova scanned the interior with her portable thermal lens, sweeping slowly, methodically. Every corner, every crevice is a potential hiding place. Then she caught it. A streak of warmth on the far wall, faint, fading. A handprint, a ghostly echo of a touch. She sprinted to it, boots pounding on the unforgiving concrete. She reached out, touching the wall where the heat lingered. Still warm. He was here. Her throat tightened, a lump of emotion she couldn't swallow. The bong fluttered like a bird in her chest, wings beating frantically against her ribs. This close, she could almost hear his heartbeat. Or maybe it was her own, amplified by fear and desperate hope. Then came the scent. She stopped breathing, her senses overwhelmed. Lucan, raw, real, not the echo of a profile or a data fake. Him. Nova's knees almost gave out, the force of his presence nearly buckling her. Lucan, she whispered, her voice catching in her throat. The scent hit like a punch to the ribs. Leather, earth, rain, and something uniquely his. A complex, indefinable aroma as familiar as her skin. She pressed her face against her sleeve, fighting to maintain control, forcing herself to think, to analyze. It was too strong, too perfect. A carefully constructed illusion. Jace, she whispered into her calm, her voice barely audible. Static crackled in her ear. Then, what is it? They planted his scent. The words were laced with bitterness. She pulled out a sensor disc and held it in the air. The screen lit up, displaying a cascade of data. Scent, spike, artificial, layered with genetic mimicry compounds, witch-tagged. She closed her eyes, jaw trembling. The manipulation was blatant and cruel. They weren't hiding him. They were using him, exploiting their connection to lure her into a trap. Who would stoop to this? She asked coldly, directing her question as much to herself as to Jace. Jace sighed, the sound laced with weariness. I think someone's trying to break you. Nova reached into her coat and pulled out a small vial of salt-infused wolfsbane. With a swift, violent motion, she smashed it against the wall, the pungent odor of the herb filling the air. The false scent dissipated instantly, leaving behind only the cold, sterile smell of concrete. You want to break me? She whispered to the empty space, her voice a low, dangerous growl. You better try harder. Back at the hub, the atmosphere was even more tense. The red strings on the wall seemed to tighten, constricting them. Jace had news, and it wasn't good. They're cycling him. Nova looked up, eyes narrowed, her expression unreadable. What do you mean? I traced the pattern of the fakes. Every 15 hours, a new trail, a new location, always out of reach. They're hurting us. He pointed to a section of the map where the red string spiraled outwards, leading them ever further from the center. Nova swore under her breath, the curse a release of pent-up frustration. They're running a pattern. And at the center, Jace nodded, his face grim. There's a dead zone. Thermal, digital, even astral. Nothing gets in or out. Then's where he is. The realization was a cold certainty. But we can't get in blind. We need a way to breach it without alerting them. Nova's eyes burned with resolve, a dangerous glint in their depth. Then we stop chasing ghosts and we start setting traps of our own. The hunt was about to change. They were no longer the prey. The residence chamber had been offline for nearly a decade, a monument to a bygone era of desperate measures. Dust motes danced in the single beam of Jace's flashlight, illuminating the intricate web of wires and archaic symbols lined the walls, buried deep beneath the old watchtower, a structure abandoned in the bloody aftermath of the last pack war. It was a hybrid relic, part bleeding edge tech, part potent magic, all undeniably dangerous. Its existence was a secret, a whispered legend among the older pack members. Nova stared intently at the pulsing console, its lights flickering with erratic energy, while Jace knelt beside it, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was meticulously rerouting power through a series of archaic rune-etched conduits, each a conduit for raw, untamed energy. The air crackled with latent power, raising the hairs on Nova's arms. This thing hasn't been used since the Eclipse trials, he muttered, wiping sweat off his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a smudge of grime on his forehead. And those ended badly. Let's hope we don't repeat history. Can it find him? Nova asked, her voice tight with a mixture of hope and dread. Each second ticked by felt like an eternity. Jace looked up, his expression serious. It's not a tracker, Nova. It's a mirror, a bond amplifier. Think of it like tuning a radio to a specific frequency. You boost the emotional signal through the mark, trying to catch an echo of the other half. Amplify the faint connection you already share. He adjusted the dial, the metallic click echoing in the confined space. It's risky, imprecise, and potentially devastating, but it's the only lead we have. Nova rested her hand over her heart, feeling the faint but persistent pulse of the mark. Still there, faint, weak, but undeniably present. A tangible link to Lucan, a beacon in the darkness. If there's even a whisper of him left, she said, her voice resolute, I'll hear it. I have to. Jace hesitated, his gaze lingering on her face, searching for any sign of wavering. You know the risk, right? This isn't like reading a message. You open the bond wide, no filters. If he's in pain, you feel it. If he's being broken, you experience it with him. I said I'll hear it, Nova repeated, her voice unwavering. She was prepared to endure whatever horrors awaited her on the other side of the bond. Lucan was worth it. He gave a solemn nod, acknowledging her determination. All right, sit. Hold nothing back, empty your mind, and let the bond guide you. Nova settled into the core seat, a cold, unyielding structure of metal and stone. She rested her arms on the connection pads, palms down, feeling the subtle vibrations humming beneath her skin. The metal felt alive, pulsating with the remnants of old magic. Ancient rituals performed in this chamber. Symbols etched along the walls flared to life, glowing with an ethereal light, spiraling in ancient, forgotten tongues. Jace typed in the final command, a complex sequence of runes and alphanumeric codes. The room dimmed, the shadows deepening, enhancing the sense of isolation and vulnerability. The air grew thick with anticipation, charged with raw magical energy. The bond sparked. A jolt of electricity shot through Nova's veins, making her gasp. Everything fell silent, save for the rhythmic thumping of her own heart. She floated in memory first, adrift in a sea of shared experiences. Her mind scanning the bond's timeline, searching for anchors, familiar touchstones, rooftops under a starlit sky, carefree laughs echoing in the night. First electrifying brush of skin, the moment the mark burned bright, forging an unbreakable link, and he whispered her name like it meant something sacred. She pushed deeper, past the pleasant memories, bracing herself for what lay ahead. The static grew louder. A cacophony of white noise threatened to overwhelm her senses. Then, pain. It hit like a wave. A crushing force stole her breath and threatened to drown her. It was visceral, immediate, and excruciatingly real. It was Lucan's pain, flowing through the open bond, flooding her consciousness. Chains, cold metal biting into flesh, the coppery taste of blood in the back of her throat. Muffled sounds, the guttural growls of unseen beasts, the sibilant whispers of cruel voices, distorted, mocking laughter, a heavy hand around his throat, choking the life out of him. Nova screamed through clenched teeth, the sound trapped in her throat, but she held steady, refusing to break the connection. She had to endure it, to find him, to bring him home. Then Nova. His voice was ragged, barely audible, a broken breath on the wind, but it was him. She focused harder, clinging to fragile sound like a lifeline. Nova, I'm not gone. Tears welled instantly, blurring her vision. He was alive. He was still fighting. Lucan, I'm here, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. We're coming for you. Hurts. Can't shift. They've bound the wolf. Her heart nearly stopped, a wave of icy fear washing over her. He sounded like he was underwater, or half dreaming, teetering on the edge of oblivion, still alive, but barely. Her fingers clenched the metal grips, her knuckles white. She poured everything into the bond. Love, rage, defiance, her name etched in her soul. "Find me," he pleaded, his voice a desperate whisper against the onslaught of pain. "I will," she vowed. "I won't stop until I do." And then, static again. The link fractured with agonizing abruptness. The pain snapped back like a whip, leaving her gasping and disoriented. She collapsed forward, her body trembling, the echoes of his suffering still reverberating through her. Jace was already pulling wires free, severing the connection, ending the torment. "Nova! Nova! Say something! Are you alright?" She sat up, dizzy and nauseous, but grinning through tears. The pain had been horrific, but it had been worth it. "He's alive," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and determination. "Where is he?" Jace demanded, his eyes scanning her for injuries. She shook her head, trying to piece together the fragments of information she had gleaned. "I don't know yet, but I felt the chains. Cold, synthetic, like inhibitor cuffs, but worse. New tech. And there were voices. Southern accent. Coastal dialect. Maybe the wastes?" Jace blinked, processing the information. Narrows it down considerably. I'll start cross-referencing dialect patterns with known rogue territories. He began tapping furiously on his wrist-mounted console. Nova stood, adrenaline fueling her broken limbs, pushing past the pain and exhaustion. He said they've bound the wolf. They're suppressing his shift. That's why he's not breaking out. Jace cursed under his breath. "It's black-level tech. Not even legal in war zones. It's a complete violation. They are rewriting the rules," Nova said darkly, her eyes hardening with a cold resolve. "Then so will we." That night, Nova stood alone on the rooftop where it all started. The place where she and Lucan had first met, the place where their bond had been forged. The city lights stretched out before her. A glittering tapestry offered little comfort. She didn't cry. She had no tears left to shed. She didn't shatter. She was made of stronger stuff than distance. She made a promise, a vow whispered into the night, carried on the wind. It was a promise to Lucan, and a warning to those who had dared to take him. "I heard you, Lucan. I'm coming for you. And God's help the bastard standing in my way." Her voice was low, but filled with an unwavering conviction. The hunt had begun. Jace's voice was sharp in Nova's ear as she raced through the underbelly of the East Transit Loop, the echo of her boots swallowed by the cavernous space. Metallic tongue and the musty scent of decay filled the air. "Stop moving, now." Nova froze behind a thick, corroded support beam, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The damp concrete chilled her skin through her worn leather jacket. "What is it?" she whispered, her breath catching her throat. Infrared pulse lit up across the grid. "You tripped a silent net. But, get this, it's not public tech. No city tag, no registry ID ghost level hardware. The pack wouldn't even know it's here." The urgency in Jace's voice was palpable, a stark contrast to the sterile hum of the system he was undoubtedly analyzing. Nova scanned the concrete walls, her enhanced vision cutting through the dimness. Everything looked normal. Dull, corroded, abandoned. Graffiti swirled across surfaces, ghosts of forgotten artists. But beneath the grime, partially obscured by a layer of artificial moss, she spotted it. A narrow black slit embedded in the wall, lensless, almost invisible, watching. "Who the hell builds a surveillance system under a civilian zone?" she muttered, the words a low growl against the silence. The realization sent a shiver down her spine. This wasn't surveillance. It was something far more sinister. Jace was typing furiously, the frantic clatter of keys, a counterpoint to the oppressive quiet of her surroundings. Someone who wanted to track you too without setting off pack-wide alerts. Nova's blood chilled. The air around her seemed to thicken, heavy with dread. "You're saying they've been monitoring us before Lucan disappeared?" The thought was a punch to the gut, a confirmation of her worst fears. "Not monitoring." Jace's tone darkened, losing its edge of excitement and gaining a grim, almost clinical detachment. "Predicting. Behavior modeling, movement patterns, bond activity spikes. This isn't a spy net. This is a pre-abduction targeting system. Nova stepped out from cover and moved fast, adrenaline surging through her veins. She had to keep moving, keep thinking. How long's it been active? From what I decrypted, almost a year. The number hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. A year of meticulous planning, of silent observation. Back at the hub, the cramped space filled with the familiar glow of holographic projections, Jace projected the ghost grid across the holomap. A web of crimson lines snaked across the city's digital representation, unseen tendrils choking the life out of their lives. Look at this. He highlighted a series of intersections and rooftops, the red deepening to show areas of high concentration. These points aren't random. They follow you and Lucan from the first day you met, your training zones, his council meetings, even your off-grid runs. Nova stared in disbelief, her breathing shallow. They'd been living under a microscope, their every move anticipated. The bond wasn't even confirmed back then. They didn't need the confirmation. They had AI-powered emotional mapping. Heart rate, sense spikes, behavioral drift. They saw it before you did. Jace's voice was laced with a bitter admiration for the sheer audacity of it all. Sophisticated algorithms, leveraging every bit of data the city offered. Nova leaned over the map, fingers gripping the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. Betrayal gnawed at her. Someone inside the pack fed them this. Jace nodded slowly, his expression grim. We've got a leak. The word hung in the air, pregnant with implications. A traitor in their midst. And whoever it was knew when Lucan would be vulnerable. The realization was a cold wave washing over her, leaving her numb. They had been played, manipulated, and Lucan had paid the price. Nova's eyes locked on the central node of the ghost grid, an old telecom relay station in the dead zone Jace mentioned before. The same blackout space their false trails circled around, a forbidden sector on the city's map. Swear he is. The words weren't a question, but a statement of absolute certainty. The bond, though weakened, still tugged towards Desolate Point. Jace raised an eyebrow. You think station's the hub? I know it is. It's the only place the bond doesn't bleed through, and the only part of the city this net protects without fail. They didn't want us to see it. Logic, intuition, and the desperate hope of finding Lucan fueled her conviction. Nova paced, the urgency building within her. We need to breach relay. Disable the ghost grid. Get eyes inside. Jace frowned, his brow furrowed in concern. It's not simple. If we trip a second layer defense, we'll alert whoever's holding him. They'll move Lucan, or worse. Nova exhaled hard, trying to control the rising panic. So we ghost the ghosts. Go invisible. Jace gave a crook smile, a spark of his usual ingenuity returning to his eyes. You gave me an idea. It's risky, but doable. I don't care about risk. Rescuing Lucan was all that mattered. You might when I tell you what it is. Jace's smile widened, hinting at the audacious plan brewing in his mind. Nova arched an eyebrow, bracing herself. Ever heard of digital skin? She narrowed her eyes, the name stirring a half-forgotten memory of whispers and rumors. Experimental holocloaking overlays fake ID profiles on live bodies? Exactly. I've got a prototype. Half finished. Illegal. Glitches if you breathe wrong, but if it works, it'll make you look like one of them. Nova didn't even hesitate. The risk was terrifying, but the alternative was unthinkable. When do we start? Jace tapped the console, his fingers flying across the keys. Right now, you've got 48 hours. Then we walk straight into the heart of the net. But as Jace prepped the digital skin rig, the screens flickering with complex algorithms and half-formed interfaces, a silent alert pinged behind him, unnoticed by Nova. New access log detected. Unknown IP. Ghost Greed override request. He stared at the screen, his blood running cold. Someone was trying to take control. Someone else was watching them. The stakes had been raised. The digital skin felt like a colony of ants, each a tiny spark of static, crawling across Nova's nerves. It wasn't painful, not exactly, but acutely present, a constant reminder of the fragile artifice she wore. Thin as spider silk, woven from light and cold, it draped over her face and hands, like a second identity, a borrowed mask of flesh. Jace, his brow furrowed in concentration, worked in tight, precise movements, his fingers nimble as he layered the final commands into the interface collar around her throat. The metallic tang of the collar filled her nostrils. "You've got about 15 minutes of stability before the cloak begins to degrade," he warned, his voice tight with concern. Sweat beaded on his forehead under the dim, flickering light of their makeshift lab. "And once it glitches, you're done. No backup, no failsafe. You'll be seen for what you are." His words hung in the air, heavy with the unspoken consequences. Capture, interrogation, death. Nova rolled her shoulders, adjusting to the weightless tension of the tech. It felt like a phantom limb there, but not there. 15 minutes is all I need. She hoped it was true. The clock was ticking before she'd be seen for what she truly was, a wolf and fighter. She didn't say it out loud, but Jay saw it in her eyes, the unwavering resolve, the burning protectiveness. She would die in there, bleeding out on the cold metal floor of the station, before letting them use Lucan's bond for whatever twisted experiment they were running. The thought of them touching sacred connection, violating it, it made her teeth ache. "Your profile is mapped to an Aeron Tech agent, one of the engineers who handled grid reboots," Jace added, his fingers flying across his console. "Their entry codes still work. Barely. You'll have to bluff the rest. Act like you belong. Keep your head down." He paused, meeting her gaze. "And Nova, be careful." Nova nodded, a silent promise etched on her face. She tapped her comm once, a familiar signal to Jace, a digital breadcrumb in case everything went south. Then, with a subtle shift of light and shadow, she vanished. One moment there, the next a seamless part of the environment, an echo of someone else. The relay station loomed in the distance like a dead god's abandoned tower. No lights visible to the naked eye, no energy signature detectable by standard scans, no movement from the outside. It was a ghost in the electronic ether. But Nova's augmented eyes saw everything, a tapestry of hidden threats layered upon the mundane, motion under the walls, sentry drones patrolling their designated routes, tripwire lenses buried in the metal plating, ready to trigger alarms at the slightest disturbance. Psychic interference hums laced through the air like static-filled fog, a low, discordant symphony designed to disorient and confuse. The air tasted of ozone and fear. And all of it open to her. Now she wore one of their faces, now she walked in their shadow. The digital skin was working, for now. Inside, the station buzzed with silent, almost religious precision. Rows of terminals glowed with an eerie light, displaying complex algorithms and data streams. Server towers hummed with the power of 1,000 imprisoned minds. Drones, sleek and silent, were wired to mind-link interfaces, their metallic bodies twitching with stolen thoughts. And in the center, the heart of this digital nightmare, a chamber of cold glass, humming with an almost palpable energy. Nova walked toward it, heartbeat steady despite the turmoil in her gut, posture clipped and confident, betraying no hint of the fear clawed at her insides. She focused on the rhythm of her breath, the feel of the polished floor beneath her boots. No one questioned her. The cloak held, weaving its illusion around her. For now, she passed through the checkpoint, the guards barely glancing at her as she flashed the stolen access code, and into the main lab. The sterile air stung her nostrils, laced with a metallic scent of blood. Swan. 3 wolves, male, unshifted, trapped in their human forms, half conscious, their bodies limp and vulnerable, chained to cold medical slabs. Tubes snaked into their veins, pumping them full of unknown substances, circuitry, thin, silver lines, enema, was etched into their skin like intricate data tattoos glowing faintly beneath the surface. A macabre work of art. One of them had Lucan's face, her stomach turned, bile rising in her throat. A wave of nausea washed over her. It wasn't him. The eyes were wrong, vacant and dull, lacking the spark of intelligence and warmth that defined Lucan. but it was close. A synthetic duplicate, a grotesque imitation. The hair, the build, even the jagged scar over his eyebrow, a memento from a long ago fight. His scent was almost right, a faint manufactured echo enough to pull on the bond, to create a painful dissonance in her soul, a false echo, a cruel mockery of the real thing. She kept moving, forcing herself to breathe, fists clenched so hard her knuckles cracked under the pressure. She had to focus. She had to find Lucan. Prototype D is showing high instability, a disembodied voice said behind her. A lab tech, human, but modified. Eyes replaced with gleaming lenses. Voice filtered through a metallic mask obscured their features. Their faces were unreadable, inhuman. We've already lost 2 bond sequences. The mate imprint keeps rejecting the copy. The synthetic link won't hold. Desperation laced their voice. Nova froze, every muscle tense. The air seemed to thicken, pressing down on her. They weren't copying Lucan. They were trying to replicate something far more profound, far more dangerous. They were trying to forge a bond. Still, what made mates sacred? The unbreakable connection, the unwavering loyalty, the shared soul, and weaponize it, reducing it to a string of code. The thought was abhorrent. Another tech joined the conversation, their voice sharper, more impatient. We need a real one to stabilize the imprint. The clone data isn't strong enough. The female's resistance is corrupting the code. So, when do we pull him from deep containment? Not yet. Aaron says, we wait. The female still resisting. He wants her broken first. He wants to see her suffer. The words were spoken with a chilling detachment. Nova's hand twitched toward her blade, concealed beneath the stolen uniform. Every instinct screamed at her to lash out, to tear these monsters apart, to free Lucan from their clutches. She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. She was a statue carved from ice. Because was the moment the tech beside her turned their lens-like eyes focusing on her directly, piercing through the illusion, and frowned. A flicker of suspicion crossed their faces. Hey, your overlay's glitching. The cloak stuttered, the carefully constructed illusion faltering. Once, a fleeting distortion of her real reflection in a nearby screen, a glimpse of the wolf beneath the skin. Enough. Shit, Jace hissed in her ear, his voice laced with panic. Get out, now. Nova turned on her heel and walked, not fast, to avoid drawing attention, not too slow, to avoid suspicion, past the clone cells, the grotesque parodies of Lucan, through the door, a silent boundary between her and discovery, into the outer ring. The elevator was 15 steps away, a sanctuary of metal and anonymity. 12. Each footfall echoed in the sterile silence. 9. The sweat trickled down her spine, icy and unwelcome. Another flicker, more pronounced this time. The digital skin was unraveling. She hit the pad, summoning the elevator with a desperate prayer. The guard behind her, galvanized by suspicion, finally called out, "Hey, stop!" The door slid shut as the alarm started to scream. A piercing wail shattered the silence and unleashed the hounds of hell. Outside, the sky was bleeding gold as the sun dipped below the horizon. Jace met her in the pre-designated tunnel, his face grim. He straddled a stolen bike, its engine already roaring, a getaway vehicle ready to launch. Fury burned in his eyes, a reflection of her own. You okay? His hand hovered over her arm, hesitant. No, Nova snapped, breath racked, the remnants of the digital skin prickling on her skin like phantom insects. They're making copies, trying to hack the bond, and they're using Lucan to stabilize it. He's still alive, but if they pull him from the containment, they'll break him, Jace finished, his voice dark with understanding. The implications were clear. Nova climbed onto the bike, the leather of the seat cold against her legs. The wind whipped through her hair, carrying the scent of pine and impending war. Then we don't wait anymore, she said, her voice hard and unwavering. We go now. The bike roared beneath them as they tore through the service tunnels under Sector 12, the air thick with the smell of ozone and decay. Nova gripped the handlebars like she could choke answers out of the wind, her knuckles wide against the worn grips. The tunnel walls blurred past in a dizzying stream of shadow and grime. "You saw the clones?" Jace shouted over the engine's growl, his voice echoing in the confined space. He clung to the back, his body tense, a silent question mark etched into his posture. "I saw them. One looked like him." The confirmation hung in the air, heavy with dread. "Could have been an illusion," Jace offered, a desperate attempt at reason, clinging to the hope this was all a twisted trick. Nova whipped around, her eyes flashing with a ferocity cut through the dim light. "No, they had his scent, Jace, the metallic tang of his fear, the wood smoke scent of his rage. I felt the bond twitch. You don't fake." The bond, the psychic link between her and Lucan, was a lifeline she trusted more than her own senses. Not unless someone is tampering with your brainwaves, or the bond itself. The thought hung in the air, a chilling possibility. Nova's silence was answer enough. The idea someone could manipulate the bond, their connection, was a violation of the deepest level. Jace clicked his tongue, a sound of frustration and grim understanding. Son of a bitch. They're forging bonds. Why? Why risk all tech on something they can't control? He couldn't fathom the logic. The bond was volatile, unpredictable. Nova's voice dropped low, dark. A growl vibrated with repressed fury. Because they want to control it. Bonds make Alpha stronger, more focused, more ruthless. You replicate it. You build a perfect army, a weaponized force with unwavering loyalty. Yeah, well, newsflash, they haven't. Because they still need him. Jace pointed out the obvious flaw in their plan. Lucan was still the key, the original template. Exactly. And if they pull him out of containment, they'll break him enough to bleed the bond dry. Nova pictured them torturing him, pushing him to the edge, siphoning off his power. Jace leaned forward, eyes narrowing, his mind racing to grasp the implications. "Then we hit them tonight." Nova slammed the brakes. The bike skidded, tires screaming in protest, until they lurched to a halt inside a rusted maintenance bay beneath an old mag train line. Dust motes danced in the weak light, filtering through cracks in the ceiling. "Not yet," she said, her voice firm, resolute. "They're ready for a direct hit. I need to know where he is before we breach. We can't afford to charge him blind." Jace pulled out his tablet, fingers flying across the screen, lines of code scrolling at an impossible rate. "Then we run a thermal ghost trace on the clone lab. Backtrack power usage. See which chamber draws the most energy. It'll be containment. Do it fast. Every second they have him, he's slipping further." The urgency in her voice was palpable. Time was running out. 20 minutes later, as Jace stared at the thermal map like it insulted him personally, his face a mask of frustration. The data was convoluted, a labyrinth of conflicting signals. "This doesn't make sense." Nova leaned in, her gaze sharp, dissecting the image on the screen. "What?" "The core power is looped. Instead of drawing from the main grid, it cycles in reverse, like it's feeding energy back into something." His finger traced the flow of energy, highlighting the anomaly. Nova's brow furrowed. "Feeding it into what? A machine? A being? I don't know. But there's something else. Look here." He pointed to a flicker on the display, a patch of icy blue amidst the warmer hues. "Chamber is colder than any other room. Absolute near zero. They are keeping him in stasis." Nova swore under her breath, a harsh, guttural sound. "They're not suppressing the wolf. They're freezing it, keeping him in the shutdown loop." The revelation was sickening. It's why the bond felt distant, not broken, paused. Jace realized. The code wasn't destroying the connection, it was merely suspending it. "Then let's press play," she growled, her eyes burning with a cold fury. "Where's the access?" Jace hesitated, his face grim. "It's the catch. The code chamber's under Sector 13, governmental zone, fully sealed, controlled by the council." Nova's eyes burned. "You're telling me our own people are involved?" The betrayal cut deep. "I'm telling you, Aaron couldn't pull this off without help. He needs the council's resources, their access, their blind eye. Silence hung between them, heavy with accusation and suspicion. The implications were staggering. Then Nova stood, her stance firm, unwavering. We go in through the river vaults. Old Smuggler's route runs right under the council building. If it still exists, we'll find it. Jay smirked, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. Illegal, dangerous, forgotten, your style. You're not wrong, she admitted, a fleeting smile playing on her lips. He packed the gear fast, his movements efficient, practiced. And when we get in, what's the play? We find Lucan. We wake him up, and we burn their little science project to the ground. Her voice was a promise, a vow etched in blood. Later that night, at the river vaults, it was the smell hit first. Old blood, rot, and salt water. A cloying, suffocating stench turned the stomach. Nova crept through the crumbling corridor, the damp air clinging to her skin like a shroud. Gun in hand, cloak activated, its shimmering weave blending seamlessly with the shadows. Jace followed, his pack humming with the energy of the specialized gear it contained. You ever been down here? He whispered, his voice barely audible above the drip, drip, drip of water. Once, years ago, before the mark, she replied, her voice low and husky. What for? Nova grinned faintly, a glint of defiance in her eye. Let's say the council wasn't always my favorite bedtime story. Jay snorted. Why am I not surprised? They reached the old security door, rusted, barely attached to its hinges, a relic of a forgotten age. Nova placed a palm on the panel, hoping for a flicker of recognition, a ghost of power. Nothing. Jay snarled, popped the cover, his nimble fingers dancing over the exposed wires. He bypassed the lock with practiced ease, the faintest hum of electricity the only sound. He glanced up, a wry smile on his face, and whispered, You owe me a drink after this. Nova kicked the door open, the decaying metal shrieking in protest. Inside, cold mist billowed, obscuring the scene. The air was thick with a metallic tang of coolant. Rows of stasis pods lined the walls, glass coffins glowing blue, humming with quiet energy, an eerie symphony of suspended life. Holy shit, Jace muttered, his eyes wide with disbelief. These aren't clones, they're originals. Nova moved fast, her eyes scanning the tags attached to each pod, reading the names and designations with growing horror. Beta ranks, rogue alphas, dissidents, everyone they couldn't turn. The implications were staggering. The council wasn't experimenting. They were systematically eliminating anyone who challenged their authority. Your pack history is worse than I thought, Jay said, his voice tight with concern. It gets worse. At the end of the row, there he was, Lucan Voss, still, pale. Chained inside an upright stasis tube, wires running into his chest, over his heart, into his temples. A network of tubes snaked around him, feeding him a viscous, life-sustaining fluid. Nova's knees nearly gave out. Lucan. The mark on her chest flared like a sun. A burning brand of connection transcended the cold, the wires, the glass. Help me get him out. Her voice was a desperate plea. Jace was already moving, his hands flying over the control panel. Shutting down cryo sequence. 30 seconds. Nova touched the glass, her fingers tracing the outline of his face, her voice shaking with a mixture of relief and terror. I found you. You held on. You held on. Behind them, alarms screamed, shattering the silence with their piercing wail. Security breach in Vault Room 9. Target acquired. A distorted voice echoed through the chamber. Jace cursed. We've got company. Nova drew her blade, the polished steel gleaming in the blue light. Let them come. The fight had begun. The stasis pod hissed, a mechanical sigh of release. A blast of icy air, thick with the scent of sterile chemicals and the lingering chill of cryosleep, rolled out as a reinforced glass door split open with a pneumatic whump. Nova didn't hesitate. She'd waited too long already. She stepped into the confined space, her boots echoing on the metal floor, hands reaching for Lucan even as Jace shouted behind her, his voice laced with urgency. Wait, don't! His warning was sharp, laced with a premonition that tightened Nova's stomach. Too late, Lucan's eyes snapped open. The movement was sudden, violent, like a predator, startled from slumber, solid gold, glowing, feral. They were not the warm hazel eyes she remembered, filled with laughter and love. These eyes burned with an unnatural light. A primal intensity sent a shiver down her spine. He grabbed her throat in less than a second. His grip was a vice, the cold metal of his enhanced hand a stark contrast to the sudden, intense heat radiating from his body. Lucan! Her voice was a strangled cry, caught in the tightening pressure against her windpipe. Panic flared, but she fought it down. She didn't fight him, not yet. Her voice stayed low, steady, a desperate attempt to anchor him, like speaking to a thunderstorm, trying to coax the lightning back into the clouds. It's me, Nova. She poured all her love, all her hope, into those 3 words. His grip tightened. The pads of his fingers dug into her skin. Heat flared off him like a furnace, a palpable wave of raw power and barely controlled aggression. Jace, his face grim, pulled his pistol, its sleek black barrel pointed at Lucan. But Nova snapped, turning her head slightly. Don't, Lucan growled. Low, guttural, not a voice. A beast warning. A sound resonated deep in her bones and told her this was not the man you'd been under too long. She whispered, gasping for air. They locked you in a loop, froze your instincts, but you're back now. You feel the mark, don't you? She hoped, prayed, the bond between them, the mark they shared, could pierce through whatever programming or manipulation they had subjected him to. His nostrils flared, drawing in ragged breaths. His golden eyes remained fixed on hers, unblinking. He smelled her. He detected the unique scent was hers alone, a combination of the ozone tongue of her energy abilities and the subtle, earthy aroma of the rare herbs she used. For a second, a flicker of confusion, a spark of recognition, danced behind those glowing eyes. The beast seemed to recede, replaced by a ghost of the man she loved. Jace edged closer, his stance balanced, ready to react. Nova, I'm giving him 5 more seconds before I drop his ass. This isn't Lucan. This is a weapon. No, he knows me. He knows me. Her voice pleaded, desperate. She had to reach him. She would reach him. Lucan snarled again, then blinked. The golden light in his eyes wavered. Nova? The name scraped out of his throat, a broken sound, hoarse and raw, like the word had to crawl out of a dark cave inside him, fighting against an unseen force to break free. Relief slammed into her, so potent it almost buckled her knees. Yes, yes, baby, I'm here. She let the desperation, the fierce love, his hand dropped, his fingers loosening their hold on her throat until they were resting there, trembling. She caught him as his knees buckled, preventing him from collapsing completely. He was weak, disoriented, but the terrifying golden glow in his eyes was fading. Jace holstered the pistol, the click of the weapon sliding into his magnetic holster loud in the sudden silence. And here I thought this was gonna be the part where he tears you apart. Guess I owe you a round. Lucan clung to her, breath ragged and uneven. They took everything. Every dream. Every scent. I couldn't feel you. It was nothing. The words were slurred, as if he was struggling to remember how to speak. Nova held his face between her hands, her thumbs tracing the sharp angles of his cheekbones. You're feeling me now. I'm not leaving. Not again. The vow was a promise to him, and to herself. But the fragile moment shattered as the unmistakable sounds of heavy boots pounding overhead echoed through the vault. Jace swore a harsh, clipped sound. They're coming in hot. We've got maybe 60 seconds before this place turns into a kill box. They know we're here, and they know you're awake. Nova turned to Lucan, her eyes searching his and assessing his condition. Can you run? He shook his head, dazed and disoriented. Not yet, but I'll fight. The words were slurred, but the determination in his voice was unmistakable. Jace tossed him a sleek, black shock blade, its hilt wrapped in worn leather. Then get ready, because they sure as hell are. 30 seconds later, gunfire echoed through the narrow chamber, the sharp crack of energy weapons, punctuated by the sizzle of discharged electricity. Nova ducked behind an overturned med cart, its metal frame offering meager protection. A stun round slammed into the wall beside her, leaving scorched, smoking marks. "They're trying to take us alive," Jace said, his voice tight with controlled fury as he returned fire, taking down a guard with a perfectly placed shot. "They still need him. They need the Alpha." Lucan stood, still shirtless, his lean, muscled body marked with a network of glowing data scars, the imprint of the experimentation he had endured. But his grip on the shock blade was solid, his stance balanced and ready. Not anymore. The golden light in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, steely resolve. Nova rose beside him, her voice sharp and commanding. "We push to the vault elevator. I can trigger an override from there and cut off their reinforcements." Jace nodded, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings for threats. "Cover left. Lucan on his flank. Make sure no one gets close." Lucan's eyes narrowed, a flicker of the old skepticism returning. "You're giving orders now, little witch." Jace smirked, a flash of white teeth in the dim light. "She upgraded." They moved as a unit, a well-oiled machine forged in the crucible of countless battles. Nova sprinted first, a blur of motion, slicing through the closest guard with practiced precision. Her energy blade hummed, leaving a trail of ionized air in its wake. Lucan followed, a blur of fury and lethal grace. Poth, his shock blade, cracked bone, muscle, and armor with terrifying ease. He moved with a speed and ferocity belied his recently awakened state. One of the guards shouted, his voice cracking with fear. "The Alpha's loose." "Repeat, Lucan Voss is active. Seal the exits." "Damn right I am," Lucan growled, his voice a low rumble of primal rage, grabbing the man by the vest and hurling him into the wall with bone-jarring force. The man crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Nova hit the override panel, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. 10 seconds. The elevator doors would only open for a short window, and they needed to be inside before the guards could regroup. Jace launched a flash charge down the corridor, its blinding light and deafening blast momentarily disorienting their pursuers. White light burst across the space, washing out the shadows. Screams followed, muffled and desperate. The elevator door slid open with a reassuring ding. Lucan turned to Nova, his eyes filled with a complex mix of gratitude and lingering pain. "You saved me." Her voice cracked, raw with emotion. "Not yet, but I will." She would never let them take him again. Minutes later, they emerged into the night, blinking against the sudden glare of the cityscape. They were panting, bloodied, and alive, but they knew their reprieve was temporary. The city lights looked different now, tinted, distorted, like every shadow might hold another enemy waiting to spring their trap, like every street had eyes watching their every move. Jace scanned the area, his eyes sharp and alert. "We've got 3 minutes until console responders flood this sector. They'll be dropping nets and scanning for energy signatures. We need a new safe house, one's off the grid." Nova helped Lucan into the back of the stolen transport, wincing as he leaned heavily on her. His strength was coming back, but slowly. The process of reawakening his body and mind was clearly taking its toll. She kissed his forehead, her lips lingering against his skin. "You're not broken, you're still you. Underneath all programming, you're still the man I love." He closed his eyes, his face etched with weariness. "They were trying to overwrite me, make me forget you, make me someone else. A weapon, nothing more. You didn't let them." Her voice was firm, unwavering. "I almost did." His confession was barely a whisper, filled with self-loathing. Nova leaned in close, her breath warm against his ear. "Almost doesn't count." The fight was far from over, but for now, they were together, and it was all that mattered. "You're not gonna like this," Jace muttered. Eyes locked on the screen as lines of code blurred past like a digital waterfall. His fingers flew across the keyboard, a frantic dance driven by urgency and a growing sense of dread. Nova leaned over his shoulder, her brow furrowed, her gaze equally intent. The air in the safe house crackled with tension. "Try me." She's seen her fair share of nightmares in code. She doubted anything could surprise her anymore. He enlarged the node cluster on the hologram, the complex web of connections swirling into a dizzying display. He highlighted a buried link, a thin tendril of data almost invisible to the untrained eye. Signal from the lab, the one pulsing from Lucan's stasis pod. It's been bouncing every 6 hours. It roused through 5 ghost servers, jumping across the network like a panicked rabbit, and lands. He tapped the final key, the holographic display snapping into a sharper focus. A single point on the map blazed with light. Here, inside the console's echo database. Lucan paced behind them, shirt on now, boots laced tight, fury radiating off him like heat off a forge. His eyes burned with a cold anger. A predator cornered. The news from the lab had only been a prelude. This was a full-blown declaration of war. You're telling me the console's been broadcasting my biosignature? His voice was a low growl, barely contained, a coil spring ready to unleash. Jace turned, his face pale, under the flickering light of the screens. Not yours. Look. He zoomed out, the single point expanding into a vista of digital stars. Hundreds of glowing pings, each representing a captive wolf scattered across the map like fallen constellations. They've been doing it to everyone they've locked away. Tracking bond imprints, alpha impulses, mate signals, cataloging every emotional spike like we're test subjects. They're dissecting our souls. He spat the last words out, disgust and fury coloring his tone. Nova cursed, a short, sharp sound cut through the tense silence. And this database, Echo Protocol, what's its purpose? She already suspected the answer wouldn't be good. Jace clicked into a string of decrypted headers, the code resolving into chillingly clinical descriptions. Emotion prediction AI, behavioral simulations. They are trying to predict wolf-bound behavior before it happens. Use it to control pack movements, mate pairings, even wars. They want to turn us into predictable puppets. Lucan slammed a fist into the wall, the impact echoing through the small room. The metal groaned under the force of his blow. They've turned our instincts into datasets, and they're weaponizing it, Nova said quietly, the implications sinking in. This wasn't about observation. It was about control, about domination. Worse, Jace added, his voice tight with apprehension. They're not logging info. They're feeding it into something called Project Nemos. Whatever it is locked behind 4 quantum keys. It's console-level access. This is top secret, even for them. Lucan stepped forward, voice low and dangerous, his eyes fixed on the screen. Then we crash it. There was no question, no hesitation. The violation was too profound, the threat too great. Nova nodded, her anger hardening into resolve. Time to send a message they won't soon forget. The safe house, usually a sanctuary of cluttered comfort, had been transformed into a war room. 3 holoscreens dominated the space, each displaying different aspects of the Echo Protocol and Project Nemos. Jace, fueled by caffeine and adrenaline, was orchestrating the attack. Here's how it works. We ghost in through a hijacked telecom node on West Arc, puts us inside Echo's outer firewall. Nova will breach the second tier manually. Her coding still cleaner than mine. He flashed her a tired but genuine smile. Nova smirked, a flicker of her usual playful self breaking through the tension. Damn right. Her fingers itched to get back to the keyboard and unleash her digital arsenal. Lucan, Jace said, turning his attention back to the alpha. We need your signature. Lucan raised an eyebrow, wary. You want me to walk in digitally? The thought of exposing himself to the council's prying eyes made his skin crawl. We'll mask your echo signal and ping it inside the firewall. They'll think you're still offline, still contained. The second they go looking, they'll open the back door. Saw a way in. Nova tilted her head, considering the risk. Won't risk blowing your cloak wide open, Jace? Exposing you to them? Jace nodded, his expression grim. It's a coin toss, but once we're in, we can scrub his identity, drop the echo net, and torch Nemos in one hit. It's a risky play, but it's our best shot. Lucan's jaw clenched, his resolve unwavering. Do it. The thought of the council controlling his life, controlling his future, was unbearable. He would rather burn it all down than submit. Nova's fingers danced across the manual interface, her touch both precise and fluid. The keyboard clicked and whirred as she navigated the labyrinthine security protocols. Firewall, soft here. Old code, sloppy. It's council arrogance, Jace replied, chewing on a stylus, his eyes glued to the incoming data streams. They never thought wolves would bite back. They underestimated us, and it will be their downfall. I mean, Nova whispered, a triumphant glint in her eyes. We're behind Tier 2. Routing your go signal now. Lucan, brace. Lucan closed his eyes, focusing his mind, stilling himself for the intrusion. His heartbeat synced with the pulse of the data stream, and a rhythmic thrum vibrated through his body. He resisted the urge to fight back, forcing himself to remain open, vulnerable. A digital voice crackled through their comms, cold and impersonal. Alpha signature confirmed. Awakening behavioral protocol, access granted. Jace's eyes widened, relief flooding his face. They opened the back door. We're in. Nova moved fast, capitalizing on their opening. Running trace. I'm in Nemo's core. Uploading data copy. Now to crash it. Then the screen flickered, a ripple spreading across the projected image. The air crackled with static, a warning sign that they had been detected, and a voice cut through the system, clear and cold. A chilling presence. Eyes, female, familiar. I expected more from you, Nova Corrin. Nova froze, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, her blood turning to ice. No. A wave of dread washed over her, chilling her to the bone. Jace paled, his face a mask of disbelief. Who the hell? Lucan stepped forward, his eyes narrowed, his senses on high alert. Who is it? Nova's lips tightened, her voice barely a whisper. Counselor Merring, you're in the wolf's den now, little mate, and this time you brought the fire. The voice dripped with condescension and a hint of something darker. Amusement. The interface exploded in static, the screens flashing erratically. Jace screamed, clutching his head, his body convulsing. They counter-hacked us. They're inside my systems. Nova! Lucan pulled her back as the screen shorted. Sparks flying, the smell of ozone filling the air. Data still moving, she shouted, her voice strained, fighting to maintain control. I got part of Nemo's before the feed broke. Look, the projection stabilized, the flickering image resolving into something concrete. A stasis room, bigger, colder, more sterile than the one Lucan had been held in. At the center, a child. Hooked to wires, eye, V drips, and an array of sensors fed into the complex machinery surrounding it. Faint golden eyes open, glowing with an unnatural light. They were vacant, devoid of the spark of individuality, of free will. Nova's breath hitched in her throat, a choked gasp of horror. It's not a clone. Jace stared, his face etched with shock. It's a bonded child. Their breeding imprint matches. From scratch. Lucan stepped back, horror twisting his features, the full scope of the console's depravity finally sinking in. They're raising the next generation of alphas, built to obey. Blank slates with wolf blood? Nova whispered, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and outrage. They weren't testing the bond. They're trying to own it. To control the essence of what makes us wolves. Rain hammered against the roof of the safe house, each drop a frantic beat against the silence that reigned within. The storm mirrored the turmoil brewing inside. Nova paced like a caged animal, the fluorescent lights glinting off the damp tendrils of hair clinging to her forehead. Arms crossed tight, she was a storm in motion, her mind a whirlwind of calculations and recriminations. They knew we were coming, she muttered, the words clipped and sharp. The breach went down too fast. They cut us off before we even hit the core. It was like walking into a perfectly laid trap. The frustration was palpable, a tangible presence in the cramped room. Jay sat hunched on the edge of a metal desk, his head buried in his hands. His fingers, usually a flurry of motion across the keyboard, were still and useless. I rerouted through 3 cloaked proxies. I triple bounced the go signal. Shouldn't have happened. It's impossible. His voice was muffled, laced with disbelief and self-doubt. Lucan stood silently by the window, a granite statue carved from shadows. He remained still, yet every sense was heightened. He watched the rain-slicked alley below, listening to the rhythm of the downpour, scenting the air for any hint of danger. His posture screamed alertness, a primal awareness that something was profoundly wrong. Nova stopped pacing and turned to face them both, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "We've got a leak." The statement hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. Jay's hat snapped up, his eyes wide and wounded. "You don't think it's me, do you?" The question was a plea, a desperate attempt to maintain his bond with the team. She held his gaze, searching for any flicker of deceit, any sign of guilt. "I don't want to think it's anyone." Her voice was low, tinged with a wariness that belied her youthful appearance. "Then don't say it like you already made up your mind," Jace retorted, the defensiveness creeping into his tone. He scrubbed a hand through his already disheveled hair. "She's not wrong to ask," Lucan said, his voice calm and measured, but with an underlying edge cut deeper than any shouted accusation. "We walked into a trap. It doesn't happen without a hand pushing the door open from our side. Someone knew our plan, our timing, our access codes." Jace stood abruptly, pushing himself away from the desk, with a force that sent a stack of data pads clattering to the floor. "I've been with you from day one. Before the bond, before the pack wars, I've bled for this team. I wouldn't do anything to jeopardize it." He spread his hands in a gesture of supplication, his eyes pleading for understanding. "And that's exactly why they use you," Nova said, her voice softening slightly, but her resolve unwavering. "You're the last one anyone would suspect. You're trusted, loyal, and the cornerstone of this team. Makes you the perfect blind spot." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating, cracking with unspoken accusations and simmering distrust. It was as if a lightning bolt had struck the room, leaving a residue of fear and uncertainty. Finally, Jace whispered, the word barely audible above the drumming rain. "You want me to walk?" The pain in his voice was a raw, exposed nerve. Nova shook her head slowly, her eyes filled with a conflict of emotions. "I want to believe you, Jace. I desperately want to believe you, but you don't." He stated the obvious, the words heavy with resignation. "I can't afford to." Her tone was firm, betraying the internal struggle raging within her. The mission, the cause, outweighed personal feelings. Lucan stepped forward, inserting himself between Nova and Jace, a silent mediator. "Until we know the truth, we don't split up. That's what they want. Division, distrust, isolation. We stick together. Always." He spoke with the authority of a leader, his words a lifeline in the turbulent sea of doubt. Nova stared at Jace, her expression unreadable. "We're rechecking all comm logs, every line of code you touched. We're going to dissect every digital breadcrumb. If there's something buried in there, a back door, a hidden command, I'll find it." Her voice was a steel blade, cold and unwavering. "You think I'd betray him?" Jace asked, his voice raw with a mixture of anger and hurt. He gestured towards the space where their bond with the child they were trying to protect should have been. Nova didn't blink, her gaze unwavering. "I think you might have been used." She couldn't bring herself to believe Jace would deliberately sabotage them. But the evidence, however circumstantial, couldn't be ignored. Later that night, Nova sat alone in the makeshift command center, the glow of holographic screens casting an ethereal light on her face. Lines of code cascaded down the monitors. Access logs, data traces, IP chains, a digital labyrinth she was determined to navigate. Suddenly, her fingers froze above the keyboard. She found it. A back door. Hidden in a seemingly innocuous firewall patch, Jace wrote 6 days ago. A subtle alteration, easily overlooked by a casual observer. Encrypted, subtle, almost elegant in its deception. It was the work of a skilled programmer, someone who knew the system intimately. She stared at the anomaly, her pulse pounding in her ears. The implications were staggering. Then Lucan's voice broke through the silence, calm and observant. "You found something." He had sensed the shift in her energy, the subtle tightening of her muscles. Nova nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. He didn't know, but someone piggybacked his access. They used his work to get to you, to get to all of us. Lucan's jaw flexed, his eyes narrowing. The news displeased him. Then Jace was a pawn, a tool used against us. No, Nova said softly, her gaze fixed on the screen. He's still a pawn. And the players inside the system, they're still moving pieces on the board. She opened the Nemos data fragment they managed to salvage from the failed breach. She cross-referenced it with a new access signature, running complex algorithms that sifted through mountains of data in mere seconds. A name surfaced, highlighted in stark red against the black background. Lyra Corin, Network Architect, Console, AI Division. Lucan moved beside her, his presence a comforting weight against her shoulder. You know her? Nova's throat went dry, the words catching in her throat. A wave of nausea washed over her. She's my sister. The revelation hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Lyra stood in front of a gleaming, sterile stasis pod. The child inside, no older than 5, twitched in his sleep, his golden eyes fluttering open halfway before drifting shut again. He was bonded already, the neural pathways firmly connected to the AI network. He was unaware of his purpose, a blank slate waiting to be programmed. Perfect. A voice buzzed through her comms, crisp and devoid of emotion. Nova's team breached the edge of Nemos. They are proving more persistent than anticipated. Lyra adjusted her glasses, her expression cool and detached. Let them, they are chasing shadows. I have already redirected them. They're rebuilding the core. They're unraveling our work. Then we give them something to find. A cold smile played on her lips. She uploaded a fresh string of corrupted files, meticulously crafted to mislead and deceive. They were tagged with false access logs. One's pointed somewhere else, somewhere far away. You are leading them to the rebel sector? The voice on the comms was laced with a hint of skepticism. Lyra smiled coldly, her eyes glinting with a dangerous intelligence. No one stays loyal when they think their family lied. When they believe those they trust most are capable of betrayal. Nova leaned her forehead against the cool glass of the window, the storm outside mirroring the turmoil within her. Lucan wrapped his arms around her from behind, his touch a silent reassurance. You okay? He asked softly, his voice a low rumble against her ear. She shook her head, the simple question, unlocking a flood of emotion. If Lyra is involved, if she's building those kids, then she's not the sister I remember. She's become something else. The words were laced with pain and disbelief. She might not be the enemy either, Lucan said, his voice carefully neutral. She's not on our side. The statement was flat, devoid of hope. The betrayal cut deep. A wound threatened to sever her from everything she held dear. He pulled her closer, his arms tightening around her. Then we'll find out. Together, we'll uncover the truth, no matter how painful it may be. Nova looked up at him, her eyes burning with a fierce intensity. I can't lose you again, Lucan. I don't know if I could survive it. The fear was palpable, a raw, exposed vulnerability. You won't, he promised, his voice firm and unwavering. He would protect her, no matter the cost. Behind them, Jace re-entered the room, his face pale and drawn. He held a datapad in his hand, his knuckles white as he gripped it tightly. I found something, he said, his voice subdued, and you're both gonna hate it. Jace dropped the datapad on the table like it weighed a ton, the metallic clang echoing in the sudden silence. The air in the safe house, already thick with tension, seemed to solidify. Someone's been rewriting bond triggers, he announced, his voice laced with disbelief and a hint of anger. Like custom programming them. Nova froze, her hand halfway to the coffee pot. Come again? The casual question barely masked the tremor of unease that ran through her. He pointed to the screen, the cold light illuminating his grim expression. This isn't tracking emotional spikes or monitoring mate proximity. This is full-on bond engineering. Someone is recoding fated mate connections at the neurological level. They're manipulating the foundation of what makes us wolves. He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. And guess where it started? He tapped the file name, the letters glowing ominously. Project. Genesis. Bond authored by Lyra Corin Lucan's voice. Usually a soothing baritone, dropped to a low, dangerous growl. His eyes darken, reflecting the turmoil brewing within him. They're not matching wolves by instinct anymore. They're manufacturing the bond, creating it from scratch. Nova sat down hard, the chair scraping against the floor. The implications crashed down on her, a suffocating weight. No, it's not possible. The bond is sacred. The word felt hollow, fragile. It is, Jay said, his tone devoid of comfort. They've been faking it for years. Some wolves never even feel the bond organically. They're given a trigger, a flash of light, a specific voice, a certain scent, and boom, instant attachment, manufactured loyalty, artificial control. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. It's like installing software into our brains. Nova's hands shook, her gaze unfocused. Means some of us might have never chosen, might not even be real. Our feelings, the connection, it could all be a lie. The thought was a poisonous seed, planting itself in her mind. Don't go there, Lucan said quickly, stepping in front of her, his large hands reaching to cup her face. You felt me, I felt you, wasn't programming. I know it wasn't. He searched her eyes, desperate to reassure her and himself. You sure? She snapped, pushing his hands away, her eyes wide and frantic. Because my sister wrote this code, and if she can fake a bond, then what the hell are we even fighting to protect? What is real anymore? The question hung in the air, unanswered and terrifying, flashing back to years ago. A younger Nova sat with Lyra in a sunlit lab. The sterile environment was softened by the warm light streaming through the panoramic windows, but the air still hummed with the quiet energy of the advanced technology. Screens glowed blue behind them, displaying complex waveforms and intricate code. You believe in all this? Nova asked, frowning, her brow furrowed in concern. She gestured to the screens, her voice filled with skepticism. Lyra smiled, a cool, knowing smile that never reached her eyes. I don't believe in anything, little sister. I built it. I created. Belief is for those who lack understanding. Nova shook her head, her youthful idealism clashing with Lyra's cold pragmatism. Fated mates are sacred, you can't tamper with. It's a force of nature, something beyond our control. Lyra's voice turned cold, her smile vanishing. Sacred is code people refuse to read. It's a system of predetermined responses, ripe for manipulation. And I've cracked the code. Nova's eyes burned, the memory echoing in her mind. She tried to warn me. Back then, I didn't want to listen. I dismissed it as scientific hubris. Regret washed over her, bitter and sharp. Lucan crouched in front of her, taking her hands in his. His touch was grounding, a tangible connection to reality. You think this changes what we are? What do we feel for each other? I don't know what we are. I don't know what to believe. Everything's been turned upside down. Jace cut in, his voice brisk and professional, breaking the heavy silence. It gets worse. Nova blinked, momentarily distracted from her internal turmoil. How? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. He brought up a new file, his fingers flying across the datapad. There's the list. Names. Wolves spawned through Project Genesis. One of them's marked red, terminated, bond severed, personality reset. And another one. He paused, his features hardening. He tapped the name, highlighting it in stark white against the dark screen. Lucan Voss. Nova's blood went cold, a wave of nausea washing over her. The air seemed to thin, making it difficult to breathe. They faked his bond, Jay said quietly, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and sympathy. With you. Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. The only sound was the low hum of the safe house's systems. Then, no, Lucan said, his voice low and guttural, his eyes blazing with a fierce, primal anger. They tried to fake it. But it didn't take. It's why I broke containment. It's why I found you, even through the cloaking. The manufactured bond was weak. It couldn't hold me, Nova whispered, her voice trembling. Then what we have is real, Lucan. Did it overcome their programming? Hope flickered in her eyes, a tiny spark in the darkness. He grabbed her hands, his grip tight and reassuring. It burned through the lie. That's how strong it is. Our connection is stronger than anything they could create. He pressed his forehead against hers, his gaze intense and unwavering. Don't doubt, Nova. She nodded slowly, clinging to his words like a lifeline. But doubt lingered in her eyes. A shadow refused to dissipate completely. The seed of uncertainty had been planted, and she didn't know if it could be uprooted. The main screen lit up with static, disrupting the oppressive atmosphere. Then Lyra's face appeared, her image sharp and clear despite the blocked source. Her expression was neutral, detached, as if she were observing them from a great distance. "Hello, Nova," she said, her voice calm and even. Jace reached to cut the feed, his hand hovering over the controls, but Nova stopped him with a gesture. She needed to hear what her sister had to say, even if it was a lie. Lyra stared, her gaze unwavering. "You found Genesis. Good. It was meant for you. It's time you knew the truth. Why?" Nova asked, her voice laced with bitterness. "To break me? To destroy everything I thought I knew? To free you," Lyra said, her tone devoid of emotion. "You're stronger than your instincts, than some cosmic roulette of emotions. You were never supposed to follow. You were built to choose, to forge your destiny." Lucan stepped forward, his presence radiating protectiveness and defiance. "Then let her choose now, between you and us. Let her decide where her loyalties lie." Lyra tilted her head, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "She already has." The feed cut, the screen returning to static. The sudden silence was even more unsettling than before. Nova stood before a holomap, her hands resting on the cool surface of the table, her knuckles white. The map displayed a detailed topographical view of the surrounding area, focusing on the desolate and dangerous region known as the Wastes. "She's setting up a new site. We traced the signal, deep in the wastes." Her voice was firm, masking the turmoil within. Jace whistled low, his eyes scanning the holographic terrain. "No man's land. Tech barely works out there. Half the city's dead signals, the other half's feral. It's a digital graveyard." Nova locked eyes with both of them, her gaze intense and unwavering. "Then we go analog, old school. No digital tracking, no AI, instincts, and rage. We hunt her the way our ancestors did." Lucan smiled grimly, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "My favorite kind of hunt." Nova looked at the two men she trusted most, and the one she wasn't sure she could anymore. The lies and manipulations had created a chasm of doubt, and she desperately needed to bridge it. "I need to know the truth," she said, her voice raw with emotion. "About Genesis, about my bond, about me. I need to understand what's real and what's not." Jace picked up his gear, his movements efficient and purposeful. "Then let's go tear down the lie. Let's find out what Lyra is hiding and expose it to the light." The landscape was a brutal testament to the Council's failures, its manufactured facade of utopia crumbling at the city's edge. As they steered the rover away from the pristine glass towers, the scenery dissolved into a canvas of cracked concrete and empty roads, swallowed by the broken skeleton of a world the Council had desperately tried to erase. The wastes weren't merely forgotten. They were actively condemned, a digital purgatory. Satellites refused to penetrate its atmosphere, and advanced technology whispered its last breath before collapsing into obsolescence. Nova sat rigidly in the passenger seat, one boot propped against the dashboard. The air outside was a suffocating blanket of heat and oppressive silence, the kind that seeped into her bones and waited for the first sign of weakness, the first crack in her resolve. Her fingers hovered near the window, tracing ghostly patterns on the dust-coated glass, catching glints of the ruin's walls defaced with half-burned symbols, hinted at forgotten ideologies, rusted fences curling like the brittle bones of extinct creatures. "This place is a graveyard," she muttered, the words barely audible above the hum of the engine. Lucan, his gaze unwavering, kept his eyes fixed on the road, on what pathetic remnants of asphalt remained. More like a crime scene. His voice was low, a rumble of suppressed energy. In the back, Jace meticulously adjusted the settings on the analog scanner. A relic, an old model dug out of a black market junk box. The tech they brought into this forsaken zone had to be stripped down, devoid of any traceable signals. No satellites, no AI. Raw signals, primal instinct, an unwavering nerve of beings, human or wolf, pushed to the edge. The last known Genesis signal bled out near this quadrant. Jace announced, his voice tight with concentration. But don't expect a welcoming beacon. We're on our own out here. If there's anything left, it'll be buried deep. Nova glanced back at the cracked display, a jumble of static and flickering lights. Anything? He shook his head, his expression grim. Static. This place eats transmissions like candy. It's like the whole place is designed to bury secrets. They passed the charred remnants of an old checkpoint, long since torched, the metal warped and twisted by unimaginable heat. Beyond it, the land split open, revealing the harrowing truth of the wastes proper. Endless fields of ashen ground stretching towards the horizon, and the scorched, skeletal ruins of the Genesis facilities, buried deep beneath the unforgiving earth. These were the places where humanity's ambition had festered and died. Nova's throat tightened, like something in her blood had recognized the place before her brain caught up. A ghost of a memory, a shadow of a nightmare. I've been here before, she said quietly, the words a hesitant admission. Lucan didn't look surprised, his expression unreadable. I figured. They set up camp near the base of a collapsed train tunnel, the decaying wreckage offering a sliver of coverage from overhead drones. If any still ran patrols this far out, with comms dead, every rustle in the wind carried the weight of a potential threat. Every shadow dragged its feet a little too long, harboring unseen dangers. The silence was a living thing, constantly watching, judging. Night fell like a warning, a heavy curtain drawn across a stage, set for horrors. Nova barely slept. When she did, her dreams turned jagged and fragmented, half memories warring with half nightmares. A fleeting image of a child with eerie gold-flecked eyes, screams echoing through static-filled voids, the sharp sting of cold metal on her skin, the low hypnotic hum of a machine relentlessly looping the same cold, clinical words again and again. Reset, recalibrate, rebound. She woke with her heart pounding against her ribs, gasping for air, as if she'd been drowning in her subconscious. The taste of fear lingered on her tongue. By the second day, they found it. The hidden access point was cunningly buried under a seemingly random mound of scrap metal, twisted wire, and dry, sun-baked earth. No visible keypad, no telltale digital lock. A faint, almost imperceptible metallic ridge half swallowed by the relentless march of time. Its presence was a whisper in a scream of desolation. Nova stepped closer, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her chest. Something pulled at her. A visceral, undeniable sensation of muscle memory woven through the deepest layers of her instinct. Move back, she told them, her voice barely a whisper, brushing away the accumulated dust and debris with trembling fingers. Let me try. She placed her hand against the cold metal, and for a long, agonizing second, nothing happened. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, amplifying the anticipation. Then, with a tortured groan, the ancient seal hissed, clicked, the door shuddered open, ancient hydraulics groaning in protest after who knew how long, lying dormant. The sound echoed in the stillness, a haunting lament for a world lost. Lucan stared at her, his expression unreadable, a storm of conflicting emotions raging behind his guarded eyes. They keyed the entrance to you. Nova swallowed hard, the implications of his words sinking in like a stone. Means I wasn't a subject. I was meant to come back. A pawn in a game she didn't understand. A weapon aimed at a target she couldn't see. They stepped into the lab, crossing the threshold into the heart of the nightmare. Time had clawed its way through every inch of it, leaving a trail of destruction and decay. Glass shattered, consoles split open, their innards spilling out like discarded organs. Wires hung like grotesque vines from the ceiling, swaying gently in the phantom breeze. The stench of old chemicals still clung to the walls, a faint but sharp aroma of burned ozone and decay, a sickly sweet reminder of the horrors that had transpired within these walls. Nova's footsteps slowed as she reached the center table, one she recognized with a sickening jolt of recognition, though she desperately wished she didn't. Her hand trembled uncontrollably, as she ran her fingers along the cold, smooth surface of the restraints, tracing the contours of her past torment. "This is where they tried to override my bond," she whispered, her voice laced with a mixture of pain and defiance. "Where they tried to make me something I'm not." Lucan moved beside her, his presence a silent reassurance, a bulwark against the rising tide of her fear. "And you fought it." His voice was a low growl, filled with pride and a fierce protectiveness. She didn't answer. Not yet. The memories were too raw, too painful to articulate. Jace, his brow furrowed in concentration, pried open an old datapad. Its screen cracked and faded. "Still has power," he muttered, his fingers flying across the unresponsive interface. "Barely." He worked in silence for a few minutes, a hush falling over the room, and then a low, distorted recording started to play. "Subject N01 resists neural compliance. Emotional response is unstable. Begin rebound sequence. Trigger imprint using subject V09, Lucan Voss." The air in the room dropped several degrees, a palpable chill settling over them. Nova's stomach twisted into a knot of nausea. The casual cruelty of the words, the cold detachment in the speaker's voice, made her skin crawl. "It's you," Jace said, slowly, his eyes filled with a mixture of shock and understanding. "They used you as the bond key." Lucan's jaw clenched, his features hardening into granite. "I didn't remember any of it. They must have wiped us both." The realization ignited a fury within him, a burning desire for retribution. Nova's voice cracked, her carefully constructed defenses crumbling. So the bond wasn't real? It was programmed? The question hung in the air, heavy with doubt and despair. Lucan turned to her, his eyes blazing with an intensity that banished all shadows. "No, it may have started fake, a twisted experiment. But what did we build? It wasn't theirs. It was our choice. You broke their bond, Nova. You didn't run. You burned the protocol right out of your head." He reached out and took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "It's real. It's us." Jace's scanner started to chirp softly at first, then faster and faster until it reached a frantic crescendo. "We're not alone." Footsteps echoed down the long, silent corridor. Dozens of them, approaching rapidly. Lucan's claws slid free with a sharp hiss, extending from his fingertips like deadly blades. Nova's hand instinctively went to her blade, the familiar weight of it providing a small measure of comfort. They braced themselves for a confrontation, their senses on high alert. But what stepped out of the shadows wasn't the Council strike team, sent to recapture their lost asset. They were wolves, or what was left of them. Eyes glowing with a faint, unnatural gold light, some still carrying half-burned Council branding seared into their skin, others with crew tech scars embedded across their temples, a testament to forced augmentations. They were the discarded remnants of the Council's experiments, abandoned and forgotten. They looked at Nova with a strange mixture of recognition and awe, as if she were a legend come to life. One woman stepped forward, lean and ragged, her clothing torn and stained, her voice rough from years of disuse. "You came back," she whispered, her voice filled with a fragile hope. "The one who broke the chain." Nova blinked, bewildered. "You know me?" The woman nodded slowly. "Your scream, years ago. It shattered the link. We all felt it. We didn't know where it came from." Jace stepped forward, stunned. "You mean she didn't reject her own bond? She took the whole system down?" Nova stared around at the assembled wolves. The broken pack, abandoned by science, by the Council, by fate itself. And they were still here, waiting, watching, enduring. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of guilt and awe. "You do now," the woman said, her gaze unwavering. "So what will you do with it?" Nova looked at Lucan, then at Jace, then at the sea of lost, half-healed souls in front of her. The weight of their expectations settled upon her shoulders, and she answered without hesitation, her voice ringing with newfound conviction. "We take it down, all of it." They moved at dawn. The sky was a bruised purple, the sun a distant promise obscured by the perpetual haze of the wastes. there was no rallying cry, no grand speech to stir their blood. The sound of boot steps on shattered concrete, the scrape of claws against the unforgiving earth, and the low, collective growl of wolves who'd spent years surviving on raw instinct and scraps of memory, a symphony of resilience forged in despair. Nova stood at the front of them, a silhouette against the dawn, her spine straight as a steel rod and jaw set in a hard, unwavering line. She walked through the bones of a world that tried to erase her, a world she was now determined to reshape. The Pharaohs, though no one called them anymore, not within earshot of Nova, followed with wary eyes, their faces etched with the stories of their suffering. They carried weapons cobbled together from broken tech and sheer will, rusted pipes repurposed as clubs, scavenged energy cells wired to emit debilitating pulses, and blades sharpened on the bones of their enemies. Some bore neural scars, invisible wounds twitched at phantom connections. Others bore the brands of the Genesis Project, cruel symbols seared into their skin like shame stitched into their flesh, reminders of the lives stolen and the identities fractured. But despite the pain, they weren't lost anymore. The blankness in their eyes had been replaced with a flicker of hope, a spark of defiance. They had her, Nova, the one who'd screamed the system down, the glitch in the council's perfect order. The catalyst had set them free. She adjusted the strap of her pack, feeling the reassuring weight of the explosives and the salvage data drives. Her voice was low, almost a murmur, but carried the weight of unspoken promises. We found schematics in the old lab. There's a second facility less than 10 miles from here, and it's still operational. Each word was a carefully placed stone on the path to vengeance. Lucan walked beside her, his dark eyes narrowed, scanning the horizon for threats both real and imagined. His presence was a comfort, a silent testament to their shared history and unwavering loyalty. Are you sure it's active? He was a grounding force, his pragmatism a necessary counterpoint to Nova's fiery determination. Nova nodded. A subtle movement belied the turmoil within. They left behind a hidden signal repeater. Jace pulled a low-frequency ping last night. Console protocol, cold storage tech. Looks like they moved Genesis underground and kept it running. A festering wound hidden beneath the surface. The thought churned in her stomach, a nauseating mix of anger and disgust. Jace, a wiry figure whose brilliance was only surpassed by his eccentricity, caught up, tossing her a modified earpiece. His fingers danced over the device, ensuring its optimal performance. Won't last long in this zone, but you hear me until we get close. After that, the comms will dead again. Too much interference. He offered a lopsided grin, a fleeting glimpse of the boy he used to be. Nova slipped the piece in. The subtle hum against her ear was a lifeline. Then we moved fast. The wolves fanned out information, a strange hybrid of military precision and primal instinct, an echo of the packs they'd once been, before the council had torn them apart and tried to rewrite their DNA. Some limped, their bodies bearing the scars of past battles. Some had twitchy eyes, still recovering from the neural feedback of failed bonds, the phantom pain of connections severed. But beneath the imperfections, a raw strength simmered. They were ready, more than they were hungry. Hungry for justice, for revenge, for a future free from the council's control. The waste shifted around them, a desolate landscape sculpted by neglect and destruction. Fog crept in like it was alive, tendrils coiling around ruined structures and half-buried signs obscuring the past while hinting at the horrors yet to come. The air buzzed with the weight of old frequencies, a cacophony of distorted echoes, the ghosts of signals trying to scream, the whispers of forgotten lives. They arrived at a ridge by midday. The sun, a hazy disk, cast long, distorted shadows, transforming the ruins into grotesque figures. Below lay the new Genesis site, Nas, half-buried, camouflaged beneath the crumbled remains of an industrial transport yard. From a distance, it looked dead, another forgotten relic of a broken world. But Nova had learned better than to trust silence. She dropped to her belly, the gritty earth pressing against her cheek, and peered through the scope of a salvage sniper lens. The world snapped into sharp focus, revealing the subtle signs of activity. 2 sentry drones, cloaked, but I can see the shimmer. Motion sensors, 2. Tight perimeter. Her voice was calm, clinical, the voice of a predator assessing its prey. Lucan knelt beside her, his presence a reassuring weight. How many ways in? His questions were curt, efficient, born of years spent navigating treacherous landscapes. 3. 1 main tunnel, 2 vents. Vents are tight, vertical climbs. Main tunnel is suicide unless we trigger a blackout. She outlined the options, each fraught with danger, but each offering a glimmer of hope. Jace cracked his knuckles, the sound sharp in the stillness. Crouched behind a makeshift uplink node cobbled together from scraps of salvaged technology. His fingers danced over analog toggles and scratched out screens, whispering to machines like they were old friends, coaxing them to life with arcane commands. I can kill the power for 6 minutes, tops. After, we're blind. He was their digital ghost, their invisible hand in the machine. Nova nodded, her decision made. 6 minutes is enough. Lucan's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking in his cheek. The tension was palpable, a silent acknowledgement of the risks ahead. You'll go for the core? He didn't need to elaborate. They both knew what it meant, the heart of the operation, the source of the Council's power. I'll end it. He didn't argue. This was her burden, her fight. Instead, he said, I'm with you. A simple statement, but one that carried the weight of unwavering loyalty and unconditional support. They split into 3 groups. Nova took a team of the most stable former subjects, ones who could still function under pressure, who could channel their rage into focused action. They were her shield, her blade, the embodiment of her unwavering determination. Jace ran tag from the ridge, a lone sentinel perched on the precipice of chaos, his fingers dancing over the scavenged controls with feverish intensity. Lucan led the flanking squad, circling to the north to draw attention when the blackout hit, a calculated distraction designed to draw the enemy away from Nova. The clock started the second the lights cut, plunging the Genesis site into an unnerving darkness. The silence was deafening, broken only by the frantic scrambling of guards caught off guard. Nova dropped into the vent shaft, her hands gripping the corroded metal as she descended into darkness. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay, the metallic tang of old blood. Every breath echoed in the confined space. Every sound was a warning. She hit the ground and moved fast. Footsteps ghost silent, blade drawn. A predator stalking its prey in the shadows. Years of surviving the waste had honed her instincts, sharpened her senses, and transformed her into a weapon of unparalleled efficiency. The corridors were cleaner than the last lab, disturbingly so. Active, maintained. Somewhere ahead, she could hear the hum of servers, the pulse of cold machinery pumping out control like a drug, feeding the console's insatiable hunger for power. A shadow moved to her left, a council soldier, his face obscured by a helmet, his weapon raised. She struck before he could speak, her blade slicing fast and clean through the vital arteries in his neck. Years of training had purged any hesitation, any remorse. This was war. He dropped without a sound, another casualty in a conflict he barely understood. Nova kept moving, her resolve hardening with each step. The air grew colder, the hum of machinery louder. Past broken nameplates, discarded identities of those deemed expendable, past files tagged with numbers instead of names, reducing human lives to mere statistics. Then she reached the core. It was a glass column, bathed in an eerie blue light, surrounded by frozen tanks, subjects on ice, held in stasis, wires snaking to their necks, glowing faintly with neural interference. They were trapped in a perpetual nightmare, their minds hijacked, their wills suppressed. Data streamed across a central panel, names, bond scores, neural resistance percentages, reducing human connection to a series of cold-calculated equations. The air was thick with the stench of manipulation and control. These weren't test subjects. They were products, commodities to be bought, sold, and exploited for the Council's twisted agenda. One of the tanks hissed, and a guttural sound echoed through the sterile chamber. Inside was a wolf, a young wolf, barely 18. His face was pale and gaunt, his eyes closed, his expression serene, still breathing, still dreaming someone else's dream. Nova slammed her hand on the console, the impact jarring through her arm. She pulled every lever marked override, ignoring the warnings flashing across the screen, defying the program protocols. Alarms screamed, deafening and insistent. The lights turned red, painting the room in a hellish glow. Somewhere in the distance, gunfire erupted. Lucan's team had engaged. The chaos had begun. Jace's voice buzzed through the comm once, a garbled message, then cut out. The interference had finally overwhelmed the signal. She was alone. She didn't stop. With shaking hands, fueled by adrenaline and a burning desire for vengeance, she wired the core for destruction, rigging the data to bleed out through a hidden signal. A blast of truth headed straight for the public networks the council didn't control, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Her sister's face flickered across the console, a ghostly apparition preserved in a final message, a secret left behind for Nova to discover. If you're watching this, you weren't supposed to survive, but you did, so now you get to choose. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, a challenge and a promise. Nova stared, breath caught in her throat, her mind reeling. The weight of her sister's legacy settled upon her shoulders. You're not a product, Nova. You're a key, and keys unlock or destroy. She pressed the final command, severing the connection, unleashing the chain reaction. The lab shuddered, groaning under the strain of impending destruction. Tanks hissed open, releasing their frozen prisoners. Wolves collapsed to the floor, gasping, disoriented, freed from their digital prisons. Outside, the ridge exploded in light. Jace had triggered the last wave of the blackout, sacrificing himself to buy them time, giving them cover to flee. Nova ran, heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through her veins, dodging sparks and falling metal, the roar of the collapsing facility echoing in her ears. Lucan found her at the entrance, his face bloodied, his clothes torn, but alive. You did it, he breathed, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and relief. She grabbed his hand, her fingers interlacing with his, her grip firm and unwavering. We did it. Behind them, the Genesis core collapsed, burning into the earth, taking every corrupted bond and every damn lie with it, a funeral pyre for the Council's ambition and a testament to the resilience of the broken pack. The future was uncertain, the path ahead fraught with danger, but for the first time in a long time, they had a glimmer of hope. They had each other. The sun broke through the haze like a silent reckoning. The oppressive curtain of smoke and ash had choked the sky since the Genesis core meltdown finally yielded, allowing harsh rays to pierce through and illuminate the ravaged landscape. It was a sun that offered no warmth, no solace, only the stark reality of what remained. Smoke curled in thin spirals from the ridge, the remnants of the Genesis core still smoldering and spitting defiant embers into the wind. The sky was wide and brutal, the kind didn't offer comfort, only clarity. The lie had been burned away along with the facility, and the truth, raw and unfiltered, had been unleashed upon the world. The wolves had once been caged, their instincts suppressed and their spirits broken. They were blinking into the light for the first time, struggling to comprehend their newfound freedom. Lucan stood at the highest point of the ruins, a solitary figure silhouetted against the unforgiving sky. His posture was squared, his boots planted firmly, as if he were ready to carry the weight of every broken wolf out there on his broad shoulders. He wasn't looking out at the wastes. The desolate expanse stretched before him. He was taking it in, assessing it, and claiming it, not with greed or arrogance, but with a quiet determination. This was his territory now, their territory. Below him, the freed Genesis subjects shifted restlessly, a sea of uncertainty. Some were feral-eyed, their inner beasts raging after years of confinement and forced control. Others were dazed and weak, scarred not physically but emotionally by years of isolation and experimentation. They'd been stolen from their lives, their identities erased, bonded to strangers against their will, and used like weapons in the Council's twisted games. And now they had no alpha, No pack structure, no direction. Not until Lucan spoke. His voice carried, not because of volume, amplified by the desolate landscape, but because of presence. It resonated with a strength born of hardship and a conviction forged in fire. We were bred to be controlled, he said, sharp and calm, his words cutting through the nervous murmurs below. But we were never meant to be owned. Wolves turned toward him, their heads lifting, eyes focusing with newfound interest. Shoulders straightened, a primal response to the authority in his tone. Hope, tentative and fragile, flickered in their gazes. I was taken too, Lucan continued, his voice softening slightly, acknowledging their shared pain. I was stripped of my bond, my pack, even my name, but I remembered who I was. And now you will too. Nova stood a pace behind him, a silent guardian, a proud and steady presence. Her gaze swept over the crowd, not as a leader seeking power, but as a protector, her eyes filled with fierce compassion and unwavering loyalty. She was his anchor, the grounding force that kept him balanced on the precipice of responsibility he now faced. His fire burned with a fierce loyalty that mirrored his own. And Lucan? He was their alpha, whether they knew it yet or not. He was the embodiment of their rebellion, the catalyst for their liberation. I'm not here to rebuild the old pack, the way the council designed it, he said, his voice regaining its strength and conviction. I'm here to build something new. Not bound by bloodlines or rigid hierarchy, but by choice, by shared purpose. You follow me not because of instinct or forced obedience. You follow me because you believe in freedom, because you believe in yourselves. And if you don't, then walk. No one will stop you. Silence descended, heavy and expectant. The fate of this ragtag group of liberated wolves hung in the balance. Would they embrace their newfound freedom, or would they crumble under the weight of their past? Then, one by one, they stepped forward, breaking the spell of uncertainty. A scarred male, his body bearing the testament of countless experiments, dropped to one knee, a gesture of respect and allegiance. A young female, her eyes wide with fear but her chin held high, raised her chin and nodded, a silent commitment. Another knelt, then another, the movement spreading like a wildfire through the crowd. A ripple of understanding passed between them as wolves recognized not power in Lucan, but purpose. A purpose resonated deep within their souls. Jace stood nearby, hunched over his salvage terminal, his fingers flying across the keys. His brow was furrowed in concentration as he monitored signals, his eyes flicking across the new data streaming across the screen. We've got confirmation. Packs are coming out of hiding. The signal spread to over 20 sectors. The council's trying to lock it down, suppress the information, but it's too late. We've got a wave. They can't contain it. He paused, his face tightening with concern. But we've also got incoming. Lucan turned to him, his gaze sharp and focused. Council forces? Jace nodded grimly. Mobilized. TOLs. Drones. Boots on the ground. Retaliation mode. They're not gonna let this go. Lucan looked at Nova, his eyes conveying a wealth of unspoken understanding. Then it starts now, she nodded, her expression resolute. We hold here long enough to get the broken clear, get them to a safe location. Then we move. Fast. There's no point in getting caught in a siege. I'll jam their satellite sweeps, Jay said, already typing furiously, his fingers blurring across the keyboard. Buy us a window. Maybe 20 minutes, tops. Lucan raised his voice again, addressing the crowd, his words laced with urgency. The council thinks we're still prey, we're broken and easily controlled. They think we'll scatter when they show teeth. But we don't run anymore. We reclaim what was stolen from us. We fight for our right to exist. He turned to his people, because that's what they were now. Not rescued subjects or escaped experiments. Not strays or outcasts. They were his pack, bound together by shared trauma and a burning desire for freedom. If you're ready to fight, to stand your ground and defend your freedom, you stay with me. If you're not, if you need time to heal and regroup, Nova will lead you to safety. Either way, you live free, is my promise. No one moved, not one walked away. Nova stepped up beside him, taking his hand in full view of the crowd, not submissive, not cowering behind him. Beside him, as an equal, a partner, a warrior in her own right. A silent declaration of their bond, a symbol of the unity they were forging. Jace glanced up from his terminal, a grim grin spreading across his face. Satellites blind, let's make them regret every wire they ever planted in us. Let's show them what happens when you underestimate a wolf. Below the ridge, dust started to rise, swirling into ominous clouds as council transports, armored vehicles, and gunships cut across the ruins. Fast and hard, their engines a deafening roar, shattering the fragile peace. Lucan's eyes went gold, a primal response to the impending threat. His voice, a low, resonant command cut through the noise. Wolves, form up, claws extended, glinting in the harsh sunlight, shoulders squared, chest puffed out in defiance, teeth bared in snarls of anticipation. The air crackled with energy, with a collective rage that had been simmering for years, now ready to erupt. And behind him, Nova whispered, her voice filled with a fierce pride, echoing his own, let's show them what a real bond looks like. The fight for their freedom had begun, and the council was about to learn what it meant to face a pack of truly free wolves. The words spread faster than fire through dry brush. Rogue packs, once fractured and silent, were moving again. Sending encrypted pings danced across the forbidden frequencies. Word-of-mouth scouts, whispering secrets through shadowed alleys. Scent marks deliberately laid across old trade routes like cryptic breadcrumbs for the lost. The council had tried to bury the truth, to smother the embers of rebellion, but what Lucan and Nova had done at the Genesis core had cracked the system wide open, and a seismic shift resonated through the entire fractured wolf community. And now, wolves, real ones, not the council's sanitized versions, were stepping out of the shadows, their eyes burning with a light long thought extinguished. They didn't come with loyalty oaths or polished uniforms. They came scarred, armed with scavenged tech and raw fury, and ready to bleed, not for the council, but for themselves. Each scar told a story of defiance, of survival against impossible odds. Lucan met them at the old rail yard. Neutral ground, strategically chosen for its lack of council surveillance, thanks to Jace's signal dampeners, which hummed with barely contained power. It was the kind of place built for ghosts. Broken steel skeletons of forgotten engines, rusted tracks vanished into the overgrowth, the pervasive smell of old oil mingling with the crisp scent of dry pine. Sunlight filtered weakly through the gaps in the corrugated iron roof, casting long, distorted shadows. The perfect place to start a rebellion, hidden from prying eyes and the long reach of the council's control. Nova watched as the Alphas arrived, a silent audience to a power play she had helped initiate. Each arrival was a statement. Some came alone, solitary figures, radiating self-reliance. Others brought packs behind them, ragged, wary, but fierce, their eyes darting nervously, assessing the threat level of this gathering. A woman with silver-streaked dreads cascading down her back and eyes like mercury, shifting, elusive, and cold, walked straight up to Lucan and didn't bother with formalities. Her presence commanded attention. "You're the one who cracked the council's leash?" she asked. Her voice a rasp of gravel and banked heat hinted at a volatile temper. "I'm the one who broke my own," Lucan answered, his voice calm but unwavering, his gaze locking with hers. He projected strength and conviction, but Nova knew the inner turmoil he battled daily. The woman tilted her head, a flicker of amusement in her mercury eyes. "Name's Vex, my pack's feral born, never bent a knee to any damn council dog. You've got my interest. But I follow strength, not stories. I've seen enough lies spun to choke a mountain." Lucan didn't flinch from her scrutiny. "Then watch what we do next. Our actions will speak louder than any words." She smirked, a flash of teeth in the dim light. Good answer. Behind them, Jace was a whirlwind of activity inside the railcar they converted into a mobile hub. The air inside crackled with the energy of jury-rigged technology, a symphony of blinking lights and whirring fans. His fingers flew across the keys of old consoles, painstakingly jacked into salvaged satellites. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he wrestled with the complex code. "I'm patching into rogue comms," he called out, his voice tight with concentration. "Getting pings from the southwest. Sounds like the console's trying to rebond captured wolves before they defect. They've got mobile stations. Bond cages on wheels. Cruel and effective and mobile, which makes them hard to track." Nova stepped into the rail car, her brow furrowed with concern. She scanned the map displayed on Jace's monitor, a web of encrypted signals and projected routes. "What's the closest unit? We need to act fast." "Half day west," Jace replied without looking up. "Heavily armed, but moving slowly. They're not expecting a hit. Arrogance is their weakness." A soft cough came from the corner of the rail car. Nova turned, noticing someone new. A girl, no more than 20, was hunched over a separate rig. Jace had hastily rigged up, long auburn hair pulled into a messy knot, fingertips flying across the holographic keyboard with unsettling speed. Her energy was quieter than Jace's, but razor-focused. She didn't look up when she spoke. "I can confirm, traffic patterns are too clean. They're running blind. Static cloak, no scramblers, easy pickings." Jace arched a brow. "You get in without tripping my firewall?" "I built half your firewall," she said, smirking faintly. "You didn't notice I was already here." Nova looked between them, amused. "Friend of yours?" Jace blinked, then gave a half grin. "This is Farron, one of mine, technically, from the Red Line EchoNet. She intercepted our signal flare and showed up with her gear. Like, a lot of gear." "I knew something was happening," Farron said, still typing. "Didn't know it'd be a full-scale wolf revolution, but I figured you could use a second set of eyes." Lucan walked in, already pulling a tactical vest over his shoulders, the weight of it familiar and grounding. "Then we give them one. A hit they'll never forget." Jace hesitated, his fingers pausing over his keyboard long enough for Farron to glance sideways at him. "There's more," he said finally. "Word is, the Council's inner ring is preparing to cut its losses. If they think they're losing ground, they'll trigger an erase protocol. Burn sites. Kill experiments. Wipe digital trails, including anything tied to Genesis." Nova's eyes darkened. A cold dread settling in her stomach means evidence. "And the wolves are still in containment. They'll be exterminated without a second thought." The thought twisted in her gut. They had to save them. Lucan turned to Jace, his expression grim. "Can you map the locations before they vanish? Before the Council can bury their sins even deeper?" "I can try," Jace said. "But I'll need time. Disrupt the mobile units first. Give me the breathing room I need to locate the hidden sites." "Done," Lucan said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "We'll hit the west unit before dawn." Farron finally leaned back, glancing at Jace. "I'll stay on Overwatch. Layer the signal masking, clean your logs, and ghost the pings. They won't know what direction you hit from." Jace gave a crooked grin. "Careful. I might start to like you." Farron smirked again, eyes on her screen. Too late. By nightfall, the strike team was moving, a shadow army slipping through the undergrowth. Lucan led at the front, his senses sharp, Nova at his side, her blade a silent promise. Vex stalked behind with her feral-born pack, their movements fluid and predatory. No one spoke much. The air was thick with tension and purpose, the silence broken only by the rustle of leaves and the distant cry of a night bird. Nova could feel it. Something big was coming. This wasn't a raid. It was an ignition, a spark to light a raging inferno. They reached the convoy before sunrise, the first slivers of light painting the sky with streaks of pink and orange. 6 console transports, hawking metal beasts, parked on the ridge overlooking a tiered containment line. Soldiers, clad in sterile white armor, patrolled the perimeter, their faces hidden behind visors, their weapons held at the ready. Inside, wolves in shock collars and chemical restraints sat in silence, too weak to shift, their spirits broken, too numb to scream. Their eyes, once filled with untamed fire, were now dull and vacant. Lucan crouched beside Nova on the ridge, his gaze hardening as he surveyed the scene below. "Vex, take your crew wide and flank the east," Jace, hit the lights the second you see the first move. No hesitation. Nova gripped her blade, the cold steel, a familiar comfort in her hand. Are you sure about this? We're walking into a hornet's nest. Lucan looked down at the broken wolves below, his expression a mixture of anger and pity. They need to see what a real alpha looks like. They need to remember who they are. And then he moved, a force of nature unleashed, like a shadow with teeth. He dropped into the convoy like fury made flesh, tearing through the outer guard before the first alarm finished blaring. Vax's wolves surged from the east, a whirlwind of claws and snarling teeth. Nova followed close behind, blade in one hand, stun darts in the other, moving with precise and silent efficiency, a ghost in the chaos. Jace's EMP pulse cut through the camp. A wave of pure energy washed over everything, frying every restraint collar in a single blinding flicker of blue. The darkness after the flash was absolute. And the wolves inside? They woke up. Snarls turned into howls, and a chorus of primal rage echoed through the hills. The scent of fear reversed, no longer coming from the prisoners. Now it was a council who ran, their sterile armor offering no protection against the unleashed fury of the awakened wolves. 20 minutes later, the camp was quiet. The only sounds were the groans of burning vehicles and the ragged breathing of the survivors. The freed wolves stood, dazed but no longer broken. Their eyes, still adjusting to the freedom, reflected the flickering flames. Lucan paced in front of them, blood on his hands, his eyes burning like gold fire. He didn't bark orders, didn't try to dominate. He spoke the truth, raw and unfiltered. You don't owe me anything, he said, his voice resonating with sincerity. But if you're done being owned, if you're ready to take back what they stole, then stand. Not for me, for you, for yourselves. One by one, they rose. Each movement was a testament to their resilience, a refusal to be broken. Nova watched him from the edge of the circle, her chest tight with a mix of pride and awe. He didn't need to dominate anyone. He had earned them, their loyalty forged in the crucible of shared pain and the promise of a better future. Vax walked over, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. I follow strength, remember. A ghost of a smile played on her lips. Lucan arched a brow, waiting. You've got it. Hell, you breathe it. She extended her hand, her mercury eyes holding his gaze. Firebrand's yours. Lead us. He shook it, his grip firm and steady. We all lead, we all burn. The fire had been lit, and there was no turning back. The council would soon learn they had awakened something far more dangerous than they could ever control. The convoy was already in motion. 3 council trucks, hulking and ominous. Reinforced steel plates gleamed under the slivers of moonlight that pierced the dense canopy above. Each truck was guarded by enforcers clad in shock armor, their visors reflecting the dim light like predatory eyes. Inside, cages were bolted to the truck beds. Crude prisons, crammed with sedated wolves. Their eyes were half open, unfocused, and their collars blinked red, a constant, mocking reminder of their captivity. Lucan crouched on a rocky ridge overlooking the road, his stance low and predatory. His eyes, sharp and focused, narrowed as he assessed the situation. Night clung to the forest like a protective shield. A cloak of darkness offered both cover and concealment. But the wind, cutting and raw, carried a different story. It carried the clawing metallic sting of captivity, the scent of fear, sharp and accurate in the air, and something worse, resignation. A heavy, suffocating despair clung to the fur of the captured wolves. He wouldn't let it stand. The council had broken them, caged them, and tried to erase their spirit. He would remind them what it meant to be free. Positions? He asked into his calm, his voice a low, controlled growl. Jace answered immediately, his voice crackling with nervous energy. Grid's in your favor, Alpha. They've got no drone coverage past the next bend. Blind spot. We're ghosting their comms, feeding them static, but I can't hold it for more than 6 minutes. Their firewalls are adapting. Copy, Lucan said, his mind already calculating the time. Nova, west flank, she replied, her voice calm and battle-ready. a reassuring counterpoint to Jay's anxiety. I've got eyes on the lead truck. 2 guards on top, 4 inside. Standard configuration. Farron chimed in, her voice precise and analytical. Rear vehicles, your weak point. Fewer guards, no escort, minimal armor. You breach there, they'll scramble forward. Exactly what you want. A diversion to split their forces. Lucan's fingers flexed, tightening into fists. The scent of fear was fading, replaced by the rising tang of adrenaline. Perfect. Team 2, hit the rear guard on my mark. Jace, keep static running as long as you can. Nova, be ready to intercept if they try to flank. He signaled to the small strike unit beside him. 3 reclaimed wolves who'd fought tooth and claw to break from the council's leash. Scars, both physical and emotional, crisscrossed their bodies, a testament to the brutality they had endured. They waited now for his word, not out of fear, but belief. They weren't past waiting for a command. They were warriors trusting their leader. He'd earned trust. He'd faced down their inner demons, helped them rediscover the wildness the council had tried to extinguish. He was more than a leader. He was their alpha. Go. The hit was fast, brutal, precise. A whirlwind of coordinated chaos was unleashed upon the unsuspecting convoy. The rear truck detonated in a flash of smoke and screeching metal. Non-lethal charges built by Farron, designed to incapacitate, not kill. Staggered guards coughed and swore, blinded and disoriented, reaching for weapons too late. The air filled with the choking scent of burnt fuses and acrid smoke. Lucan dropped from the ridge like a shadow, landing hard on the packed earth. He moved with a savage grace, a blur of controlled violence. 2 steps, elbow to one throat, silencing him instantly. Turned to the other one, driving the air from his lungs. His teeth bared in the snarl was all wolf, a primal expression of rage and liberation. Behind him, his team moved in a coordinated blur, releasing the back doors of the truck, ripping the locks apart with brutal efficiency. They worked with practiced movements, catching the sedated wolves as they slumped, one by one, into their arms. Gently, carefully, they pulled them from their cages, promising freedom with every touch. Nova's voice crackled in. Front guards are circling back. They've realized what's happening. You've got 30 seconds before they regroup and establish a defensive perimeter. Jace added, his voice laced with urgency, and I tripped a kill switch. They know the wolves are being freed. They lost comms with the rear. It's about to get hot. Lucan turned to the others, his eyes blazing with determination. Pull them out. Head to the tree line. Establish a perimeter. I'll hold the flank. Buy you time. No, one of the reclaimed wolves said, his voice rough with emotion. He stood tall, his eyes fixed on Lucan. You're not alone anymore, Alpha. Word, Alpha, hit hard. Not a title conferred by authority. A truth forged in blood and shared trauma. A bond of loyalty ran deeper than any command. Lucan nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken oath. Then let's show them what free wolves do. Smoke drifted up from the wrecks, curling through the trees like ghostly fingers. The council guards were either unconscious, groaning on the ground, or retreating in disarray. No deaths, only injuries. A carefully calculated level of force. This wasn't about bloodshed. It was about sending a message burned into the dirt for all to see. We are not yours. Lucan stood in the center of the road, his shirt torn, a cut bleeding freely at his temple. But his eyes were clear, his gaze unwavering. He was bruised and battered, but unbroken. Nova approached him slowly, brushing soot from his shoulder with a gentle touch. We're bold, even for you. Needed to be. His voice was low, raspy. They needed to see we're not afraid. They'll hit back harder. They won't let this go unpunished. Then we hit back smarter, he said, a flicker of cold calculation in his eyes. We learn from this. We adapt. He turned to watch the newly freed wolves being tended by Farron and 2 others. They offer water, comfort, and whisper words of reassurance. The fear was still there, but it was being slowly replaced by hope. One of them, a young wolf with a collar still sparking sporadically around her throat, looked at Lucan like he was the sun, a beacon of light in the darkness. Her eyes were wide with awe, with gratitude, with a nascent sense of belonging. Nova saw it and smiled quietly. They're looking at you differently now. They see more than a fighter. They should, he said, his voice gaining strength. This time, they don't need a savior. They've got a pack. Later that night, back at their makeshift base, the adrenaline had begun to wear off, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. Jace patched his wounds with practiced efficiency, whistling softly through his teeth. Nova wrapped a bandage around Lucan's ribs, her touch gentle but firm. Farron was already at the computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard, loading data pulled from the convoy's nav system into the secure railcar system. She was relentless, driven by a need to understand and to dismantle the console's operations. Jace leaned back, cracking his neck with a loud pop. It was loud, we rattled their teeth. They'll be feeling one for a while. And now we see what shakes loose, Lucan said, his voice low and dangerous. Now we see what they were planning. Farron frowned, her brow furrowed in concentration. You're not gonna like it. The route wasn't random. They were moving the wolves to delete them. A burn facility on the eastern ridge. High security, total isolation. No survivors. No records. Nova swore under her breath, her eyes hardening with fury. So this wasn't a transfer. It was an execution line. A systematic extermination. Lucan's gaze went ice cold, his jaw tightening. The air in the rail car crackled with suppressed rage. Then we saved the first of many, and we'll burn the council to the ground before we let them extinguish another spark. By the second nightfall after the failed op, paranoia had set in. A creeping unease infected every corner of their makeshift camp. The vibrant hum of camaraderie, once a constant backdrop to their lives, had been replaced by a strained, dissonant silence. Wolves moved quietly, their usually boisterous energy dampened by suspicion. Eyes lingered longer, each glance a silent accusation, a frantic search for the traitor in their midst. Conversations cut off abruptly, the moment someone new stepped into the room, leaving a lingering tension that hung heavy in the air. Trust, once thick in the air like the scent of pine after rain, now frayed at the edges, threatening to unravel completely. Lucan stood at the edge of the railcar, his silhouette stark against the silver wash of moonlight. He watched the pack as they trained, their movements fluid and precise, a testament to years of shared experience and unwavering loyalty. Yet, their spirit was fractured. The unspoken accusation, the gnawing fear, was poisoning the foundation of their unity. Inside the cramped confines of their mobile command center, Jace and Farron worked in tense silence. The only sound the rhythmic clicking of keys and the low hum of the computer. They were monitoring the bait trail they'd meticulously coded into the system. A digital breadcrumb trail designed to lure out the saboteur. Any bites? Nova asked, her voice tight with anxiety as she leaned over the holomap. Its intricate network of lines and nodes glowing eerily in the dim light. Farron shook her head, her brow furrowed in concentration. Not yet. Whoever it is, they're patient, methodical. They're not acting out of chaos. This isn't some disgruntled nobody sabotaging for fun or personal gain. Jace leaned back in his chair, rubbing the back of his neck, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Which means they've got a reason, a good one. Something big enough to make them risk everything. The implication hung heavy in the air. Coercion, blackmail, something far more sinister than simple betrayal. Nova turned, her gaze hardening. Doesn't make it forgivable. The words were sharp, betraying the raw hurt and sense of violation that permeated the camp. Doesn't make it black and white either, Jace muttered, his voice laced with weary resignation. We don't know what they're holding over them. For all we know, their family could be on the line. A tone chimed, a sharp, electronic ping sliced through the silence. Farron's eyes snapped to the screen, her fingers immediately dancing across the keyboard. Got a trace. Someone accessed a false transport manifest we planted an hour ago. Masked ping. Same encryption from the ambush logs. It's a match. They're connected to the attack. Nova straightened, her posture becoming rigid with anticipation. Can we track it? Jace was already working, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Lines of code scrolling across the screen in the blur. Trying. They're smart. I'll give them. But not smarter than... Wait. I've got a location. It's local. They didn't even bounce it far. Farron's voice dropped to a hushed whisper, laced with disbelief. They're inside the camp. The words hung in the air, heavy with their implications. The enemy wasn't some distant threat. They were among them, breathing the same air, sharing the same meals, training alongside them. Lucan entered as the words hit the air, his presence instantly filling the small space. Who? He asked, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. The question was not a demand for information. It was a demand for accountability. Jace hesitated, his eyes darting between Farron and Lucan. Give me a minute. I need to isolate the device signature, make sure it's not a false positive. But Farron was already moving, her fingers a blur as she bypassed security protocols and delved deeper into the system's core. Her face went pale, the blood draining from her cheeks as all hell. The words were barely a whisper, a mixture of shock and disbelief. On the screen, Talon Reyes, a young comms runner. Loyal, quiet, devoted to the cause from day one, a nobody on paper. He was the kind of guy who blended into the background, the kind of person no one ever suspected. Because he never made waves, never drew attention to himself. He was near the main uplink during the raid, Nova said slowly, her memory sharpening. He logged inventory, said the system glitched when he tried to encrypt it. We dismissed it as a minor software malfunction. The glitch was the leak. Jace growled, his voice tight with anger. He intentionally created the vulnerability that allowed them to access our system. Lucan stared at the name on the screen for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, bring him to me. The order was delivered with quiet authority, brooking no argument. They found Talon at the edge of the training field, his shoulders slumped, his head bowed. He didn't run when approached, didn't even deny it when confronted. Lowered his eyes, his face etched with shame and despair. I didn't do it for them, he said quietly, his voice barely audible. I did it for my sister. Lucan's voice was steel, cutting through the silence like a blade. Talk. Talon swallowed hard, tears threatening to spill over. She's still in the Genesis holding grid. They showed me footage of her, chained, half-shifted, drugged out of her mind, said if I didn't feed them movement data, if I didn't give them what they wanted, they'd use her in the trials. Or worse. The words were a desperate plea, a desperate attempt to justify the unjustifiable. Nova stared at him, her expression a mixture of pity and disbelief. Why didn't you come to us? We could have helped you. They said they'd kill her if I did. Said they know, they were watching me every second, and I believed them. I couldn't risk her life. The desperation in his voice was palpable. The agony of his choice etched into every line of his face. Silence settled heavily, broken only by the distant sounds of the pack training. The air crackled with unspoken questions, with doubt and suspicion. Farron's voice crackled through the comms, breaking the tension. I can verify it. The footage is real. His sister's on site at holding station 9B. She's alive, but barely. They're keeping her sedated and malnourished, Jace added. And we've got the data now. We can use his last ping to trace the entire uplink. We could find the remaining sites from this one mistake. The rabbit hole goes deeper than we thought. Everyone looked to Lucan, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. The decision was his. How would he punish Talon? How would he use this betrayal to their advantage? He stepped forward, not with violence, as some might have expected, but with a heavy gravity, his eyes filled with a somber understanding. You broke trust, Lucan said, his voice resonating with a quiet power. You betrayed your pack, but you did it out of love, out of a desperate attempt to save your sister. It doesn't erase what you did, but it changes how I judge it. You're going to help fix it. You're going to use your knowledge to bring down those who threatened your sister and endangered our people. This is your chance to make amends. Don't waste it. The tension in the makeshift command center was palpable, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of ozone from the overloaded tech. Vigils locked, Jace announced, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The grainy, black and white, feet on the monitor sharpened, resolving to a grim picture of the council holding facility. Holding Station 9B, triple-walled perimeter, electronic locks, multiple layers, council guards, heavily armed, 2 shifts rotating every 6 hours, airtight security. He paused, his voice tight. This is a fortress. Nova, her face etched with concern, leaned closer to the screen, her dark eyes scanning the layout. Which cell? We need to pinpoint her exact location. Farron, hunched over another console, tapped a series of commands. The image zoomed, pixelating briefly before resolving into a more detailed view of the cell block. Block theta, rear corner, furthest from the main entrance, 4th door down, subject marked a 9FX3. Confirmed. His voice was grim, devoid of any satisfaction. The footage froze, capturing a heartbreaking image. A pale girl, no older than 20, was curled on a thin, stained mat in the corner of a stark, windowless cell. Her dark hair was tangled and matted, obscuring her face. She was barefoot, her skin pale and bruised, and a crude restraint collar was still locked around her slender throat, a symbol of captivity. Talon, who had been pacing, exhaled sharply, the sound like the air being violently forced from his lungs. His hand flew to his mouth, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and relief. It's Ava. My sister. She's alive. Against all odds, she's alive. Lucan, standing beside him, his face a mask of grim determination, shattered the fragile hope. She won't be for long. The council is tightening up its security. Any leak they can't seal, any loose end, they burn it. And they burn it fast. Given what Talon knows, Ava's a liability now. Jace nodded grimly. We've got one shot. One clean, precise shot. If we mess this up, it's over. With a deliberate movement, Lucan turned to Talon, his gaze intense and unwavering. This is your mission now, Talon. You lead us in. You're the only one who can navigate the place. Talon stiffened, his eyes widening in alarm. What? No, I'm not a field wolf. I'm a data analyst, a researcher. I've never done anything like this before. Lucan stepped in closer, closing the distance between them, his voice low and commanding. You will. Because this is your chance to make it right, to atone for what you've done. Your knowledge of the station, of the layout, and the security protocols gives us an edge no one else has. So either you are in, you step up and help save your sister, or you're dead weight. And dead weight gets left behind. Nova met Talon's eyes, her expression firm but not unkind. You want to save her? Earn it. Prove you're worth the risk. Talon swallowed hard, the lump in his throat making it difficult to breathe. He nodded slowly, his voice barely a whisper. I'm in. I'll do whatever it takes. The strike team moved like shadows through the dense tree line bordering the perimeter of Holding Station 9B. A thick blanket of clouds obscured the moon and stars, providing perfect cover. The council's guards were alert, their silhouettes visible as they patrolled the perimeter, but they were complacent, believing themselves to be secure in their territory. They weren't prepared for an attack this deep into their supposed safe zone, a strike born of desperation and fueled by loyalty. Lucan crouched behind the fallen tree, his hand pressed to his ear, listening to the crackling comm. Report, Farron. I've looped the outer perimeter cameras. Created a phantom loop, showing the same static scene. You've got a 12-minute window before they recycle, and the anomaly is detected. Farron's voice was tight with urgency. Copy, Nova replied, her tone calm and focused, belying the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She adjusted the grip on her pulse rifle, her movements precise and practiced. Jace's voice followed, laced with tension. Secondary relay scrambled. They can't call for reinforcements. No external comms. At least, not unless someone physically runs to the backup transmitter. Talon crept up beside them, his face pale and drawn, his breathing rapid and shallow. Cell block security is manual inside. To access Theta Block, you'll need a keycard. It's located at Central Access, Guard Post Alpha. He pointed towards the heavily guarded building in the distance. Lucan nodded once. His eyes narrowed. I'll get the card. Nova, you're with Talon. You're his protection, his guide. He turned his gaze back to the younger wolf, his voice cold and unforgiving. You screw this up, Talon. You don't lose her. You get her killed. You get all of us killed. I won't hesitate to put you down if you compromise this mission. Clear? Talon straightened, his spine rigid, a flicker of steel entering his eyes. Crystal. They breached the perimeter fence silently, like wraiths. Two wolves, trained for years in covert operations, moved with deadly efficiency, disabling patrols with precise tranquilizer darts and swift knife work. No alarms were tripped, no shots were fired. Lucan made for the central access post, slipping in through a side panel pried open by Farron's signal interference. Inside, the guard, engrossed in a game on his handheld device, didn't see it coming. A quick scuffle, a muffled grunt, and a dropped body. Keycard secured, Lucan moved with a speed and precision that belied his size, leaving no trace of his presence. Nova and Talon were already at Theta Block, standing before the heavy steel door that separated them from Ava. Talon's hands trembled uncontrollably as he slid the keycard through the reader. The mechanism whirred, and with a loud click, the door swung inward. She was there. Ava looked up slowly, her eyes blinking against the sudden flood of hallway light. She was skeletal, her eyes haunted, but alive. Talon? She rasped, her voice weak and hoarse, disbelief thick in her tone. Is you? He stepped into the cell and dropped to his knees beside her, reaching out to take her trembling hands in his. It's me, Ava. I've got you. I'm here. You're safe now. We're getting you out of here. She threw herself into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably, years of fear and deprivation pouring out of her. We have to go, Nova said gently, her voice firm but compassionate. Now, every second counts. Talon, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate need to protect his sister, lifted her easily, his strength holding for her weight, despite the tears streaming down his face. Let's finish this. Let's get her out of here. Extraction was fire and chaos. The carefully orchestrated plan began to unravel almost immediately. One guard, making his rounds, stumbled upon the unconscious body at central axis, and instinctively triggered a silent alarm. A high-frequency signal alerted the entire facility. Nova silenced him permanently before he could alert others, but it bought them only minutes. Lucan met them in the corridor, blood on his knuckles and a dangerous glint in his eyes. Go. Security is compromised. We've got heat incoming from the south wing. They're converging on our location. As they ran, Ava weakly clutched her brother's shoulder, whispering, They said no one would come for me. He whispered back, his voice filled with fierce determination. They were wrong, Ava. So wrong. I'm here. I'll always be here. They made it to the forest line as the facility lit up in a cacophony of searchlights and frantic orders blasted from the loudspeakers. Sirens wailed, piercing the night air. Farron's voice crackled in their ears. You're out. Clean run. Scrub the cams behind you. The footage is gone. Wiped clean. It's like you were never there, Jace chimed in, his voice laced with a hint of amusement, except for the part where you blew their holding system open like a damn can opener. They're going to be picking up the pieces for weeks. Lucan cracked a rare grin, the tension momentarily easing from his face. Let them panic. Let them feel what it's like to be hunted. Later that night, Talon sat by the crackling campfire, Ava curled beside him, wrapped in blankets and quiet. She was still dazed and disoriented, but alive, breathing, and safe. The light from the flames danced in her eyes, a flicker of hope replacing the despair. Lucan approached, his silhouette imposing against the flickering light. You did good, Talon, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Not for her, for the pack. You proved yourself tonight. Talon stood, his shoulders tense, bracing himself for the inevitable reprimand. I don't expect forgiveness. I know I have a lot to make up for. Lucan nodded slowly. Good, because you don't deserve it. Not yet. But maybe you're starting to earn it. But you step out of line again. You betray the pack again. And there won't be a second chance. This is your last chance, Talon. Don't waste it. Talon didn't flinch. Understood. I won't let you down again, Alpha. Nova watched the exchange from a distance, a thoughtful expression on her face. Her hand brushed Lucan's as he returned to her side. They're starting to believe in you, she said quietly, her voice filled with warmth. They're seeing the leader you are capable of becoming. They need to believe in themselves, he replied, his gaze fixed on the fire. I lit the fire. It's up to them to keep it burning. The heavy hum of the rail car was the only sound in the dimly lit space. A monotonous drone amplified the tension radiating from Nova. She stood at the front, her gaze fixed on the blurring landscape visible through the small, scratched window. The dark, industrial scenery mirrored the grim determination etched on her face. Jay's voice crackled through her earbud, his calm, collected tone a stark contrast to the chaos swirling inside her. He sounded like a cool-headed strategist miles away from the heart-pounding reality of their situation. Coordinates coming in now. There's a site half a day to the north, highly secured, but it's our best shot at getting the rest of the pack. The information was delivered with clinical precision, but Nova heard the underlying urgency. Nova's jaw clenched. Every second they spent running from the console, every mile they put between themselves and their pursuers, translated to more of their people being locked away, their spirits slowly extinguished. She wouldn't let them become forgotten ghosts, whispers in the ruins of a shattered past. She had to act, and act now. Lucan was at her side, his presence a grounding force against the storm brewing within her. He didn't speak, but he'd been giving her space lately, a tacit understanding that the battle she was facing wasn't external. We'll hit it hard and fast, Lucan said, his voice low and resolute, as he pulled on a tactical vest with practiced precision. The worn fabric conformed to his muscular frame, a familiar comfort in this desperate situation. This time, there's no turning back. We take everything. People, intel, tech. We leave nothing standing. His eyes burned with a fierce determination that mirrored her own, a shared commitment to their people. Nova nodded, the weight of his words settling on her like a promise. This wasn't about surviving anymore, about dodging the Council's relentless pursuit. This was about rebuilding, about reclaiming their future. The Emberborn weren't going to hide in the shadows, cowering and forgotten. They were going to burn the Council's empire to the ground, ember by ember, until nothing but ashes remained. Jace's voice came through the comms again, cutting through the silence. They're transferring the wolves tonight. If we don't hit them now, we'll lose them for good. The urgency in his voice was palpable. This was it. This was their chance. How many? Lucan asked, his movements precise and efficient as he pulled out a digital map on his wrist device, his fingers dancing across the screen. He was a master strategist, capable of assessing a situation in seconds. 5 or 6, Jace replied. Enough to make it worth the risk. We move now, or we lose the last of them. Nova's fist clenched, her nails digging into her palms. Every wolf they saved was a step closer to reclaiming what was taken from them, a victory against the oppressive regime that sought to control them all. But the price they paid would always be heavy, a constant reminder of what they had lost and what they were willing to sacrifice. Let's move, Lucan said, his voice steely, brooking no argument. He was ready for war. The team was ready. Farron was at Jace's side, her eyes focused, her fingers flying over a portable device as she hacked into the nearby console networks, searching for the weak spots in their security grid. She was their digital ghost, capable of slipping through firewalls and bypassing encrypted systems with ease. Got it. Farron's voice was sharp, efficient, laced with a nervous energy. I've overridden their perimeter alarms. The entry point is clear. You've got 10 minutes to get in, get out, and don't leave any trace. Good. We'll make it count, Lucan said, turning to Nova with a look that told her everything. We get them all out alive, or we don't leave at all. It was a promise, a vow, and a death wish all rolled into one. As they approached the facility, the stark, imposing structure looming in the distance, Nova's thoughts kept drifting to her sister, Lyra. The Council's grip on Nova's blood was something she could never erase, no matter how many times she ran from it, no matter how far she traveled. Her sister had been a part of this system, a cog in the machine they were fighting against, and it wasn't loyalty that held her there. It was a complete distortion of everything they had ever shared, a perversion of their bond. Was Lyra still in there? Was she still the sister Nova had once adored, the girl who had shared her dreams and secrets? Or had the council twisted her so deeply that no trace of love remained, leaving behind a hollow shell consumed by their ideology? The thought twisted in her gut, a knot of pain and regret. Nova? Lucan's voice cut through her thoughts, firm and steady, pulling her back to the present. We're close, she nodded, pushing the turmoil aside, burying it deep within. Now wasn't the time for weakness, for sentimental musings. Now was the time for action, for survival. The team moved with precision, each step deliberate, the weight of their mission pressing down on them, heavy and suffocating. Jace was already decrypting a secondary lock on the gate when they reached it, his fingers moving with practiced ease. Farron kept her eyes on their rear, scanning for any movement, alert to any sign of danger. She was their guardian angel, watching over them, protecting them from the shadows. Clear, Jace muttered, stepping back as the gate clicked open, the sound echoing in the still night air. Let's move! They entered quietly, moving in shadow, ghosts in the night. The facility was eerie, a sterile, cold place that reeked of blood and betrayal, a monument to the council's cruelty. Nova's heart pounded as they moved through the halls, the silence broken only by the sharp click of their boots against the concrete. Each footstep a countdown to the inevitable confrontation. We've got eyes on the cage, Farron whispered through the comms, her voice tight with anxiety. The wolves are being held in a reinforced block. It'll take a few minutes to override the lockdown. We don't have a few minutes, Lucan replied, his voice tense, his eyes scanning their surroundings. We move now. They made their way deeper into the facility, navigating the labyrinthine corridors with grim determination, finally reaching the cell block. Nova's gaze fell on the wolves, ragged, exhausted, their eyes hollow with despair, but alive. The sight of them tore through her, reminding her of everything she had lost, of the countless others who had suffered at the council's hand. Her heart clenched with a renewed wave of anger and resolve. They're in there, Jace's voice came through the comms again, a note of triumph in his tone. I'm unlocking the doors. Ready? Always, Lucan growled, stepping forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. Suddenly, the alarm blared, shattering the silence and bathing the corridors in a harsh, red light. Nova spun around, her senses sharpening, her instincts kicking in. They're onto us. Not if we finish this fast enough, Lucan snapped, his eyes flashing with a predatory gleam. The pack was closed, but they had to be faster, more efficient, more ruthless. Jace's fingers flew over his device, his face a mask of concentration, his brow furrowed in concentration. Got it. Doors are opening. The wolves inside barely had time to process what was happening. Most were too weak to move, their bodies broken and battered. The rest were disoriented, confused, their minds clouded by fear and exhaustion. We're here to get you out, Nova said, her voice firm and reassuring, cutting through the chaos. Stay close and keep quiet. As they freed the last of the wolves, the heavy metal doors clanging open, a sudden crash echoed through the halls, signaling the arrival of their pursuers. Council enforcers, the heavily armed soldiers who hunted them with relentless zeal, were closing in, their footsteps pounding against the concrete floor. Move! Lucan barked, shoving the freed wolves forward. The air was thick with tension, heavy with a scent of fear and adrenaline. As the pack surged forward, the sound of approaching footsteps echoing behind them, growing closer with each passing second. Exits clear, Farron's voice came through, frantic but sharp, laced with a desperate plea. Hurry! They sprinted toward the exit, adrenaline fueling every step, their lungs burning, their muscles screaming in protest. Nova felt the weight of the wolves around her, their survival depending on her, their lives in her hands. They weren't rescuing prisoners. They were saving the future of their kind, protecting the last embers of hope from being extinguished. With a final push, they were out, bursting into the cool night air. The night air was fresh with freedom, a stark contrast to the sterile, oppressive atmosphere of the facility. The facility burned behind them, a pyre of defiance, a symbol of the council's fall, a beacon of hope in the darkness. The wolves, disoriented and weak, follow Lucan and Nova, their trust placed in these two figures who offered them salvation. But they were free, reborn from the ashes of their captivity. As they regrouped in the rail car, the rhythmic hum of the engine was a lullaby compared to the earlier cacophony. Nova's chest tightened. Lyra's voice echoed in her mind, taunting her, asking her to choose blood or pack. The council saw blood as the only important thing. The answer was clear now. She had already chosen. But she couldn't deny the pain lingered in her heart, the ache of what might have been, the ghost of a sister she might never see again. The fight was far from over, and the sacrifices she would have to make were only beginning. The silence in the rail car was tense, oppressive, like a storm sitting on everyone's chest. The rescued wolves huddled together in the rear, a tapestry of fear and cautious hope woven into their fur. Some still trembled, haunted by the echoes of their captivity, while others remained alert, eyes wide with barely contained panic, their instincts screaming for escape even within the relative safety of the train. They were free, yes. The cages were behind them, the tormentors out of reach, but not whole, not yet. The scars ran deeper than skin, and the road to recovery stretched long and arduous before them. Nova stood near the front, a statue of coiled energy, arms crossed, her gaze fixed on the flickering monitor. The screens pulsed with strategic data, a digital battlefield where Jace and Farron sifted through encrypted files pulled from the last council facility. One screen held a council map, a network of oppression laid bare, its tendrils reaching into every corner of their world. The other, the screen held Nova captive, displayed the face of her sister, cold, calculating, devoid of the warmth Nova remembered. Lyra Corrin, the woman Nova had once trusted more than herself, shared secrets whispered under starry skies, a bond unbreakable in the naive dreams of youth. Now, the architect of cages, the voice behind the purge, the embodiment of everything Nova fought against. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. Lucan stepped in beside her, a silent sentinel, his presence a grounding force in the swirling vortex of Nova's emotions. "You saw her file," he said. Not a question born of curiosity, but a statement acknowledging the devastating truth. Nova nodded slowly, each movement heavy with the weight of her discovery. She was there, coordinating the transfers, overseeing the erasures. She actively participated in their suffering. She was never like when you were kids. Fern asked from the monitor, a hesitant question laced with disbelief, her fingers pausing over the keyboard. Nova didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at Lyra's sharp, calculating face frozen on the screen. Searching for a flicker of the girl she once knew, a spark of humanity seemed extinguished. "She used to be my best friend," Nova said finally, the words laced with profound sorrow. "We were inseparable. But somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing wolves as people. She sees them as assets, tools, numbers to manage, pawns in her twisted game. She's not part of the council," Jace muttered, his fingers flying across the keys, deciphering the insidious code. "She's their blade, their enforcer, the one they call on to do the dirty work. And she's going to be the one standing between us and what's left of Genesis," Lucan added, his voice grim. "If we don't take her down, expose her crimes, everything we've done so far will burn with the next erase cycle. All those lives lost, all the suffering endured, for nothing." Nova's throat felt like it had glass in it, the words catching, a choking reminder of the stakes. "Then we take her down." Her voice was low, resolute, a promise etched in steel. Later that night, Lucan and Nova stood together outside, beyond the warm glow of the railcar safety lights. The mountains loomed ahead like jagged teeth, silhouetted against the bruised purple sky, their silent sentinels bearing witness to their burden. They hadn't spoken in a while, the unspoken horror hanging heavy between them. Not since seeing the confirmation. The cold, clinical report stating Lyra had ordered the execution of 3 wolves they never got to in time. 3 lives extinguished with the flick of a pen. Nova's hands were fists, clenched so tight her knuckles were white. She imagined them around Lyra's neck, but the image brought her no satisfaction, only a deeper sense of grief and betrayal. Are you sure you are ready to face her? Lucan asked, voice low, his gaze unwavering, not doubting her resolve, giving her room to acknowledge the monumental task ahead, the emotional minefield she was about to navigate. I don't have a choice, she said, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. She's not going to stop until every wolf that doesn't serve the council is gone, until our heritage is wiped from the face of the earth. She'll come at you hard, not with words, with memories, with the past. She will exploit your shared history, twisting your bonds into weapons. Nova looked up at him, eyes fierce, a spark of defiance igniting in their depths. Let her. I've made peace with the girl she used to be, mourned her loss. It's the woman she's become. I'm going to stop. The monster wears my sister's face. Lucan nodded once, his respect evident in his gaze. Then I've got your back, all the way, through whatever comes. The plan was simple, brutal, unforgiving, a necessary evil in a world where ideals had been sacrificed on the altar of power. The Council's northern facility was a fortress, a modern-day citadel carved into the heart of a mountain pass and wrapped in a digital defense net of overlapping drones, heat signatures, and facial recognition AI. But it was also the last active site they had, the linchpin holding the Council's crumbling empire together. Farron's voice chirped in over the comms, a lifeline in the digital labyrinth. I've spliced into their tracking feeds. Got you a blind spot. 10 minutes of silence if you move fast and don't light the place up. After that, all bets are off. 10 minutes, Jace repeated, his voice crisp and professional. We breach, we get the data, and we find Lyra. No screw-ups. This is our only chance. Lucan checked his sidearm. The metallic clicked a stark counterpoint to the tense silence. This ends tonight, one way or another. They hit the facility hard, coordinated, sharp, and quiet. A whirlwind of controlled chaos, driven by desperation and fueled by righteous anger. Doors breached with silent precision, guards neutralized without unnecessary bloodshed, files secured with ruthless efficiency. Jace's hands danced over the terminal, a symphony of keystrokes unlocking the Council's secrets, while Farron whispered updates in his ear, guiding them through the digital minefield. Flickers of movement danced across the security feeds, a constant reminder of the ticking clock. And then, Nova found her. In the command room bathed in cold white light, Lyra turned slowly, her expression unreadable, as if she'd been expecting her all along. A predator awaits its prey. Sister, she said with a calm smile, a chilling display of composure. You look tired. This little rebellion must be taking its toll. Nova didn't move, her hand hovering over the weapon at her side. You look worse, haunted. Lyra's head tilted, her eyes narrowing with a flicker of amusement. You came all this way, risked everything, but you still haven't learned. You're chasing scraps. Leftovers. The strong don't live in cages, Nova. They build them. They control the narrative. They shape the world to their will. You built them with the bones of our kind, Nova snapped, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. You watched wolves be tortured. You signed the damn orders. You reveled in their suffering. Because it was necessary, Lyra said coldly, her face hardening into a mask of unyielding conviction. You think freedom looks like a pack of half-starved, broken fugitives? Chaotic and unpredictable? No. Order, control, survival. It's what I gave them. A purpose. A place in the New World Order. You gave them chains, Nova growled, taking a step forward. I'm here to break them, and to make you answer for your crimes. Lucan stepped in behind her, a silent force, his presence, a warning and a promise. Lyra's eyes flicked to him, narrowing with disdain. The infamous Lost Alpha, she said, with a smirk, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Tell me, Lucan, how long until you break too? They all do, eventually. Loyalty is a mask wolves wear when they're afraid to lead, a weakness to be exploited. Better a mask than the monster behind yours, Lucan said calmly, his voice unwavering. This pack stands together. You wouldn't understand. You've always been alone. Nova stepped forward, her gaze locked on Lyra's. You're done, Lyra. The council's fallen. Your leash is broken. The world is starting to see you for what you are. Lyra's face twitched, a crack in her carefully constructed facade. You can kill me, but you won't stop the purge. The protocols are already in motion. Every facility still standing is rigged for burn. The wolves are expendable. They always have been. We'll stop them, Nova said, her voice filled with unwavering determination. We'll free them. All of them. You'll die trying. Lyra spat, eyes burning with hatred as she circled, sweat glistening across her brow. Her fingers twitched at her sides, ready, waiting. Each muscle coiled tight beneath her skin, a predator ready to spring. Nova didn't flinch, didn't blink. Maybe, but I'll never become you. Her voice was a low, dangerous growl, a promise laced with steel. In a control room deep beneath the facility, Farron's hands flew over the keys, patching into the security network. Jace leaned over her shoulder, eyes wide as the feed lit up with Nova and Lyra's confrontation. The air crackled with static electricity, the palpable tension of the scene bleeding through the monitor. You're pushing this live? He asked, his voice a hushed whisper. Farron's jaw tightened, her gaze fixed on the screen. They need to see. All of them. The wolves are hiding, the ones still scared. They need to know who she is, and who's standing against her. A flicker of hope, a gamble on Nova's raw power, sparked in her eyes. The image sharpened, audio connected. Every screen tied to the encrypted net flickered to life across the region. Dens, hideouts, old facilities, even the refugee camps. A digital roar echoed across the network, silencing the fear, amplifying the hope. Nova lunged. The first blow was a feint. Left shoulder, right jab. But Nova was ready. She blocked, twisted, and countered with an elbow to Lyra's ribs that drove the air from her lungs in a sharp grunt. Lyra snarled and swung low, catching Nova's thigh with a brutal sidekick that staggered her backward into a metal desk. Crash! Papers flew, blood smeared across chrome. A broken monitor sparked, casting grotesque, flickering shadows across the room. Lyra charged, grabbing a fistful of Nova's shirt and slamming her against the wall. You were always too soft, she hissed, spittle flying from her lips. It's why you lost him. Nova slammed her forehead forward. Crack. Lyra's nose broke with a wet pop, blood spraying across her face and Nova's. She screamed, a primal, animalistic sound, and staggered back. Nova didn't wait. Fueled by years of repressed rage and grief, she tackled her sister to the ground. Fists hammered down, each strike a scream she'd buried too long, each blow a testament to the pain Lyra had inflicted. For Lucan, punch. Lyra's cheekbone cracked under the force. For the wolves you murdered, punch. Lyra gagged, blood gurgling her throat. For everything you burned. Lyra twisted her hips, rolled them both, now straddling Nova, her face a mask of blood and fury. She grabbed a shard of metal from the broken desk and slashed, caught Nova across the upper arm. Blood flowed freely, a crimson stain blooming on Nova's skin. You think you're righteous? You think pain makes you strong? Lyra growled, pressing the shard closer, digging into Nova's flesh. I was forged in fire while you ran with your tail between your legs. Nova caught the shard with her hand, ignoring the way it sliced deeper into her palm. Bones crunched, blood slicked her hand, staining the shard crimson. No, she grunted, her voice strained but resolute. You weren't forged. You were twisted. A fierce light blazed in her eyes, pushing past the pain, hardening her resolve. With a guttural roar, Nova bucked, throwing Lyra off, rolling to her feet, blood dripping freely now. Lyra rose too, panting, her perfect poise shattered, hair wild, face a gruesome canvas of blood and bruises. Her eyes, though, held a manic gleam. They clashed again. Knees, elbows, claws. Lyra fought like a soldier. Clinical, trained, efficient. Nova fought like a wolf, with instinct, rage, and purpose. Each blow was a calculated risk, each movement a desperate gamble. Lyra landed a sickening gut punch that dropped Nova to her knees. She raised the shard again, a triumphant sneer twisting her battered face. But Nova surged upward with a speed Lyra didn't anticipate, driving her shoulder into Lyra's ribs, lifting her, and slamming her into the wall with bone-jarring force. The impact echoed like a gunshot, leaving a spider web of cracks in the plaster. Lyra crumpled, groaning, the shard clattering to the floor. One rib, then another, snapped under the force of the blow. Nova stood over her, chest heaving, blood dripping from her wounds. Her face was bruised, her arm was torn, but her eyes, steady, sharp, unbreakable. A storm of raw power coiled beneath her skin, waiting to be unleashed. "You don't get to win," Nova said softly, her voice laced with venom. Her shadow loomed over Lyra, a predator claiming its prey. Lyra, coughing blood, tried to rise, only for Nova to plant her foot on her chest, pinning her down. The air hissed out of Lyra's lungs, a strangled gasp lost in the silence of the room. "It ends here, Lyra. You're not the future. You're the rot we're cutting out." Nova pressed down harder, her weight crushing Lyra, silencing her struggles. Lyra bared her teeth, blood dripping from her mouth, a feral snarl contorting her face. "Then do it. Kill me." Nova crouched, eye to eye with her. "No" would be easy. Her voice was low and lethal, a promise of unimaginable suffering. "You're going to live with what you did, the wolves you caged, the lives you destroyed. They'll be your jury now." Behind her, footsteps echoed in the blood-soaked room. Lucan, Jace. A few of the freed wolves standing silent witness. Lucan's expression was unreadable, a mask of grief and simmering rage. But his eyes, they burned with something deeper than pride. Nova stood tall and stepped back, releasing Lyra from her crushing grip. It was over. Across the fractured world of werewolves, screens faded to black, but the image of what they'd seen was burned into every watching soul. A beacon of hope, painted in blood and defiance, had been ignited. Nova had fought not for herself or even for vengeance. She fought for Lucan, for the broken, for the pack would rise from the ashes, fueled by her unwavering spirit and the promise of a future free from Lyra's tyranny. "She's not worth the bullet," Lucan said, stepping beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder, grounding her in the present. "But she is worth the trial. Let the wolves see what she is. Let them be the judge." Nova nodded, chest heaving, her face streaked with sweat and blood. "Let them choose justice, not vengeance. Let them decide her fate." They left Lyra in the hands of the wolves she'd once locked away, alive, powerless, and forced to face the consequences of her actions. A stark reminder that even the most fortified walls can crumble under the weight of righteous anger. Back at the railcar, as the sun crested over the mountains, painting the sky with hues of hope and resilience, Nova stood alone for a moment, staring out at the dawn, searching for solace in the vastness of the landscape. Lucan joined her, shoulder brushing hers, offering silent support. "You okay?" "I'm free," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the morning breeze. "And has to be enough, for now." The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, Nova felt the flicker of hope. The house was divided, but the wolves were rising, and she would be there to lead them to a new dawn. Lucan's fingers were gentle despite the stiffness in his knuckles, brushing dry blood from Nova's temple. The gash, a souvenir from her brutal fight with Lyra, had clotted but still throbbed an angry red against her pale skin. She sat perched on a dented steel crate in the makeshift command center, a forgotten corner of the Genesis facility, now buzzing with desperate energy. She was still in her torn gear, ripped tactical pants, a shredded vest too small for her frame, and combat boots caked in grime and blood. She refused to flinch under Lucan's ministrations, her jaw tied, eyes focused on some distant point. He cleaned the wound with a strip of gauze soaked in disinfectant, his movements quiet and practiced, a stark contrast to the chaos raging outside. The air hung thick with the smell of smoke, ozone, and the metallic tang of spilled blood. "You should be resting," he murmured, his voice rough with concern. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. casting harsh shadows that emphasized the lines of fatigue etched around his eyes. Nova huffed, a short, sharp sound that spoke volumes about her defiance. And you should be worrying about your ribs, not my face. Last I checked, you took a beating too. I am. But this. He paused, his gaze lingering on the gash, then lifted to meet her eyes. Looking. You bled for them, Nova. You fought your own blood for all of us. Let me do this. The them hung unspoken, referring to the countless wolves who had suffered under the council's iron fist. Wolves she'd risked everything to save, her expression softened enough to show the raw exhaustion beneath the warrior's mask. I didn't fight for them alone, Lucan. I fought for you too. The admission was quiet, almost hesitant, but it resonated in the small, cramped space. His hands froze for a fraction of a second, then resumed with a little more care, wrapping the fresh bandage tight. He secured it with a strip of medical tape, his touch lingering slightly longer than necessary. I know, and I saw every damn second of it. He had watched the broadcast with a mix of pride and gut-wrenching fear. She glanced up at him, her dark eyes searching his. Broadcast? Her voice was barely a whisper. He nodded, a grim set to his mouth. Farah made sure of it. She rerouted every feed, bypassed every firewall. They all saw Nova, every pack, every wolf. They all knew who stood for them now. They know what you did. Nova exhaled slowly, her shoulders slumping almost imperceptibly. The weight of everything came next, settled between them, a heavy burden shared in the dim light of the command center. The council wouldn't let her act of rebellion go unpunished. Victory would come at a cost. Then Lucan stood, rolling his shoulder to ease the pain, jaw set with renewed determination. Time to bring the whole house down. The weariness seemed to fall away, replaced by a steely resolve. The broadcast changed everything. The wolves were no longer scattered and broken, afraid or passively waiting for a rescue that might never come. They were awake now, galvanized by Nova's courage and Lucan's presence. They were rising. Across every corner of the territory, from the desolate outskirts to the heart of the city, the council's once unshakable grip began to splinter as pockets of resistance flared to life. Small, desperate groups made daring moves, toppling surveillance towers that had been symbols of oppression, breaching holding facilities to free their brethren, and hunting the remaining enforcers with a burning vengeance in their veins. The fear that had kept them shackled for so long was replaced by righteous fury. Nova's fight had lit the match. Lucan's presence fanned the flames, turning the embers of rebellion into a raging inferno. Cell 5 is free. 37 wolves extracted, minimal injuries, Jace reported, his voice crackling in their comms, barely containing his excitement. The sound of frantic keyboard clicks filled the background as he typed at blistering speed, coordinating strikes from his improvised workstation. North Tower lost power. Farron's virus tanked their primary grid. The whole sector is blind. Good, Lucan said, his eyes scanning the crumbling skyline from their rooftop perch. The council headquarters loomed in the distance, a dark monolith casting a long shadow over the city. Time to bring the whole house down. Nova stood beside him, her arm bandaged, face still bruised from Lyra's final desperate blows. Despite her injuries, her stance was unwavering, her eyes burning with the same fire that ignited the rebellion. We hit the inner ring next. The council's real power sits behind those glass walls. Are you ready for this, Lucan? Lucan turned to her, his jaw clenched, gaze unshaken. The wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of burning buildings and the distant howls of liberated wolves. I've been ready since the first wolf was caged. They took everything from us, Nova. Now we take it back. Below, the once impenetrable fortress that had been council headquarters loomed in steel and black glass, a monument to their cruelty and power. Its lower floors were already swarming with rebel wolves, their coordinated strikes moving with almost military precision, a testament to Jace and Farron's surveillance systems and the broadcast call to arms. The wolves had tasted freedom, and they would not be denied. Perimeters thinning, Jace confirmed, his voice tight with focus. Lyra's silence fractured their chain of command. They're in chaos. Farron's mapping the schematics now. 3 minutes and I can guide you straight to the inner chamber. I've got every vent, every hidden passage, every security checkpoint laid out. Inside the control van, a battered transport vehicle parked a few blocks away. Farron's fingers flew across the keys, her face illuminated by the eerie glow of multiple monitors. The complex lines of code scrolled past, revealing the inner workings of the console's security system. Patchwork security, panic response protocols tripping over each other. They're scrambling. You've got one clean shot at this, but only one. Then we don't miss, Nova said, her voice cold and resolute. There was no room for error. Too much was at stake. The plan was fast and brutal, a whirlwind of coordinated strikes designed to cripple the console from within. Lucan and Nova would breach the top floors with a tactical team. Wolves freed from the Genesis facility, all hardened by captivity and ready to fight to the death for their freedom. Every level they ascended meant more truth revealed, more resistance encountered, and more blood spilled. The council had ruled by fear, silence, and shadows. It was about to end. Light would expose their darkness. As they ascended through shattered halls and burning stairwells, resistance fighters peeled off to hold the line, securing their flanks and clearing the path ahead. The air crackled with the energy of desperation and hope. On level 18, the fighting thickened. A last-stand force of elite enforcers waited, armed with high-powered rifles, electrified weapons, and chemical dispersers designed to subdue and control. They were the council's last line of defense, loyal to the bitter end. But they weren't ready for what came through the smoke and chaos. Lucan tore through them like a storm. A whirlwind of fur and fury, no hesitation, no mercy. The rage that had simmered within him for years was finally unleashed. Nova flanked his left, precise and lethal, her gun barking with each step forward, each shot finding its mark. Behind them, freed wolves moved with grim determination, every takedown a piece of the vengeance puzzle, every fallen enforcer a step closer to liberation. The towers were falling, and with them, the council's reign of terror. The council chamber burned behind them, a husk of its former self, not with fire in the literal sense. Though the ascent to this point had been paved with explosions and infernos, desperate fights and scorched earth, but with the potent, transformative fire of purpose. Every wall had once suffocated under the weight of silence. Every corner had reeked of manufactured control, now echoed with the purposeful thud of footsteps, the murmur of voices, the raw, untamed symphony of something undeniably new being forged. The wolves didn't cheer, not yet. Jubilation felt premature, almost disrespectful. They moved with a somber reverence, their faces etched with grief for those lost, for what had been sacrificed. They moved with a heavy knowledge of survival, hard-won and dearly bought, that had come at a devastating cost. Outside, the sky was struggling to break through the oppressive gloom, birthing itself into a soft, smoky dawn. Ash, the tangible residue of their revolution, still hung thick in the air, clinging to clothes and skin, a bitter reminder of the pyre they had escaped. But beneath the gritty layer, the suffocating weight of oppression was gone, lifted like a shroud discarded in the heat of battle. They could breathe freely now, even if the air still tasted of smoke and sorrow. Lucan stood on the precipice of the future, on the rooftop of what used to be the highest tower in the territory, a monument to the council's pride and power. Now it was a windswept vantage point. The wind, a restless spirit, tugged at his worn shirt, whipping strands of dark hair across his face. Streaks of dry blood and stubborn soot painted his skin in haphazard patterns, a warrior's tapestry of the night's struggle. Nova stood beside him, her presence a comforting anchor in the swirling chaos. Her arm was cradled in a sling, a testament to her own unwavering commitment. Her eyes, usually sparkling with fiery defiance, were fixed on the horizon, searching for glimmers of hope in the nascent dawn. "You are going to do it?" she asked, her voice a low rasp, heavy with unspoken questions. Doubt? Perhaps, but mostly it was laced with a profound respect. He nodded slowly. the movement deliberate, carefully considered. We can't carry the name they branded us with, not after what they used it for. Genesis, it wasn't about progress. It was about control, about shaping us into weapons for their twisted games. Genesis was meant to create a future they could control, manipulate, and own. I want to build one we can choose. A future where we decide our own destiny. The words were simple, yet they resonated with the weight of his conviction. The burning desire to break free from the chains of the past. Behind them, a silent congregation was forming. Wolves, drawn together by the magnetic pull of hope and the shared trauma of survival. Survivors, pulled from the sterile prisons of the facilities, their eyes wide with a newfound freedom felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Fighters, weary but unbowed, the rebellion's heart and soul, their faces grim but determined, and free agents, lone wolves who had never belonged to a pack, outcasts who had roamed the fringes of society, now tentatively reaching out, seeking connection, seeking belonging. Jace, ever the pragmatist, leaned on the shattered rail beside Farin. A study in contrast. Farin's laptop, miraculously intact, was still running diagnostics, spitting out lines of code as she tirelessly worked to restore their fractured communication networks. Even as her fingers danced across the keyboard, her face was half hidden behind a rapidly diminishing protein bar, fueling her through the long, arduous night. Signal strong, Farin mumbled between bites, her focus unwavering. The world's still watching, Lucan. They know what happened here, what we did. Lucan turned to face the gathering crowd. His voice wasn't loud. He didn't need to shout to command attention. It carried not with the booming authority of the council leaders, but with something far deeper, far more potent. It was full of conviction, born from the crucible of pain and sacrifice. It was the voice of a leader who understood the true meaning of service, of a protector who would lay down his life for his pack. We were broken, he said, his gaze sweeping across the faces before him, acknowledging each individual's pain, their resilience. Divided, chained by names meant nothing but control, manipulated by lies and half-truths. Packs turned against each other, fueled by fear and distrust. Families branded feral, their bonds severed by the council's cruel hand. Our future bartered away for the illusion of security, our identities stolen and weaponized. Then, he met the eyes of every wolf before him, his gaze unwavering, filled with a fierce determination. No more. He raised his arm, the gesture simple but powerful. He revealed a new mark burned into the leather of his vambrace, a symbol of their rebirth, their defiance. A phoenix rising from a crescent moon, its wings wrapped in protective flame. It was rough, imperfect, but undeniably beautiful. From the ashes, we rise again, not as exiles, hunted and reviled, not as remnants clinging to the scraps of a shattered past, but as something stronger, something forged in the fire. We are not defined by what they did to us, but by what we choose to become. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in, allowing them to ignite a spark of hope in the hearts of his pack. We are the ember-born pack, not forged by bloodlines, by ancient rivalries, or by arbitrary designations, but by fire, by the shared pain of our past, by the unwavering choice to stand and keep standing, even when the odds are stacked against us. We are bound by loyalty, by compassion, and by the unwavering belief we can build a better future together. A silence followed, heavy with unspoken emotion, the weight of the past, the uncertainty of the future, the fragile promise of hope. It was a moment suspended in time, a pivotal point where everything could still shatter. Then, one by one, the wolves knelt, not in submission as they had been forced to do before the council, but in solidarity, in a silent pledge of allegiance, in a demonstration of unity resonated with a power no decree could ever match. Nova, her eyes shining with unshed tears, took his hand, her grip firm and reassuring. She stepped up beside him, her head held high, her voice clear and strong. This isn't your pack alone, Lucan. It's ours. We built this together, fought for it together, and will protect it together. We are the Emberborn. He nodded, his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. He gripped her hand tighter, finding strength in her unwavering presence. Jace cleared his throat, ever the voice of reason, cutting through the emotional intensity. And hey, not to ruin the moment or anything, but we've got a lot of rebuilding to do, like a lot. Farron smirked, a flash of her old spirit returning. Luckily, I've already designed a better surveillance grid, with encryption this time, and maybe a few firewalls can withstand a determined hacker. Chuckles rippled through the group, breaking the tension, reminding them even in the face of overwhelming adversity, there was still room for humor, for camaraderie. Lucan smiled faintly, his heart filled with a quiet gratitude. There's still work to do. Wolves are still lost, scattered, and vulnerable, damaged to repair, both physical and emotional. We have a long road ahead of us. But now, Nova said, her voice ringing with unwavering resolve, we do it together. We face the future, not as broken individuals, but as a united pack, the Emberborn. And we will rise. As the sun finally broke free from the horizon, painting the battered city skyline in vibrant hues of gold and fire, the Emberborn stood silhouetted against the dawn. Scarred, changed, but undeniably free. They were the inheritors of a painful legacy, but they were also the architects of their own future. And finally, they were home, not in a place defined by walls and borders, but in the hearts of each other. That is the end of this tale, but in the world of the supernatural, there's always another shadow waiting. Thank you for staying with me through every twist, turn, and heartbeat. If you enjoy the ride, there's more waiting for you. Explore the other audiobooks available on this channel. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more magic, monsters, and stories that go bump in the night. Until next time, stay curious and brave, and never stop listening.